Okay, can we have, I have 6:02, so can we have a roll call vote to start this meeting? All right, Mayor LaChapelle?
Present.
Maren?
Maren Goldstein, present.
Jonathan?
Jonathan Schmidt here.
Shannon?
And I'm here.
Marissa?
Marissa Carrera here.
Lori?
Laurie Garcia here.
And Cynthia Kwasinski here. Welcome. This is the August 25th school committee meeting. I do want to announce that we will be going into executive session to discuss negotiations with the union. However, we're going to be doing it a little bit differently from now on. When we leave regular session for executive session, we will be adjourning from executive session. We will not be coming back. So then Easthampton Media will not have to hang around for us to just say goodbye. Okay. Dr. LeClaire, do you have any announcements?
I do. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Tomorrow we begin several days of professional development for our staff. It does feel exciting to begin a new school year. We've made several new hires in the district, and we welcome these folks to our community. As a reminder to families, please do not stop by our school buildings. Please reach out to the administrative assistants or the principal if you need to connect with someone at the school. We will be placing drop boxes in front of all the schools if anyone has any paperwork to drop off. Parents will not be allowed in school buildings this year for the foreseeable future. So I just want people to start getting familiar with that. Okay, so reach out to an administrator or an admin assistant if you need anything for your building. Thanks, everybody.
So Marissa, do we have correspondence?
No correspondence or gifts this week.
Okay, do we have gifts?
None this week.
Okay. So we are going to begin public speak in a minute. However, we have a lot on our agenda, and I believe that there are people who would like to speak to two different issues. One is athletic sports in the fall, and the other is the SRO. So what we're going to ask is that we begin with 20 minutes of people talking about sports in the fall. And then I'm going to close that part and ask that anybody who would like to speak about the SRO position or anything else will be able to do that. But we'll have 40 minutes of public speak because we have an enormous amount of items on our agenda. Okay, so we are going to open that up. If you would like to raise your hand, I will be going back and forth. And Lori?
Would you please remind people about the 2 minutes? Do you want us to use the timer as we decided?
Thank you. Are you going to use a timer?
Sure. So to be fair to everyone, because one of our previous meetings, there was some dissension with people thinking that some people got extra time. And it is stated on our agenda that everyone has 2 minutes, and sometimes it goes to 6 or to 8 minutes. I also suggest if you've already spoken about one of these subjects that you please wait, because you've had your turn, and not everyone will get a turn if there are a lot of people, because we have so much to do this evening. So we're going to see how this works. I will put up my clock, and Marissa, when it gets to 2 minutes, is going to just shut you off. So keep a look at my clock. We're not being mean, we're just being efficient. Okay, so thank you so much.
Well, right now I am not seeing anyone who is raising their hand or signaling that they would like to speak. Wait, somebody just did. Let's find. Okay. All right. So I only see Evan. Okay. All right, Marissa. All right, Evan, go
Hi,
ahead.
can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. I had to call in on my phone. Thanks for letting me talk. I'm Evan Zemer. I've got kids in Maple, kindergarten and first grade. And I just wanted to speak briefly on the new DESE guidance suggesting that you require that teachers work in their classrooms. I have a couple of concerns about it. I don't see, as someone who taught before realizing that I belonged in a different career, any of those things could be done without the teachers in the building. Many of us work remotely. We know how to do that. I work with adolescents on Zoom. The best way to observe me is to get on Zoom with me, not to look in the hallway. But I also have some really selfish reasons. I could be altruistic about supporting teachers that don't want to be in person and risking virus exposure, but I've got some selfish reasons too. One is that my kid needs IEP services, and we're not going to have space in all those buildings if we cram them full of the paras and the teachers. And I'm not going to feel safe bringing my kid in person if there's a lot of people in those buildings using those spaces. I don't see how my kid's teacher and the kid's para could share a room without masks. I don't want my kid being on Zoom with my teachers in masks. And the buildings are going to be far more useful for something like a remote learning center until we're able to be far more in person. My other quite selfish reason has to do with the trauma that our kids are experiencing. My kids, by the time we're done with this pandemic, are not going to remember socializing in a world that's not like this. And we could go through the other developmental stages and the huge impacts. The adolescents I work with are having a huge impact. And we know that what helps kids be resilient is adults that feel safe and supportive. And those adults need to be able to be present with them. In my work, I work with traumatized communities and traumatized individuals, and I'm following the neuroscience developments of polyvagal theory quite closely. And stressing our teachers out feels to me like the worst possible thing right now for my kids, not just for the teachers. When we're stressed, when we're afraid, when we think that we're in danger, we shut down in a way that makes it difficult to connect, and our nerves and our faces make that connection hard. And my kids need the teachers to be connected and to feel safe so that they can really support the kids.
Thank you. I saw Zellen.
Hi, my name is Kurt Zellen. I am a parent for a student athlete in the high school, and I encourage you to fully support allowing fall sports. And actually, I would extend that to any extracurricular activities. These are all voluntary activities. I think the best people in position to make these decisions are the students and their families. Thank you.
Thank you. Kelly Brown.
Is this supposed to be a time when we're talking about just sports? Because I'll hold off.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other, I'm going to give it a second. Okay, Carrie Damon.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for speaking with us this evening. And I wrote to you all, but I want to again express our deep appreciation for all the committee has undertaken over these last few months. I work in healthcare. I understand the challenge of the decisions that you all have been charged to make. Appreciate it. I'm here tonight in support of a sports program for our student athletes. It's an important part of their student life, frankly, their connection to their coaches, their colleagues, their teammates, their co-students. It's just really important for their overall continued growth and development as a student in the district. And I understand some families may choose not to have their student participate, certainly respect those choices. We've spoken to our children about the impact and the changes that they will have to abide by if we are allowed to have sports. But I'm here today to express my husband and we both fully support having a sports program moving forward. I've seen the impact of not having it from the spring, and I think we're in a much better place with our health metrics, and certainly the DESE and the MIAA have also echoed our ability to do so with some precautions and adjustments in place. So I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else who wants to talk about sports? I'll keep scrolling through.
I see Michelle.
I would like to add.
Okay.
Hi, this is Michelle Raskovitz, Strong Street, Easthampton, and I just wanted to echo the sentiments of Carrie Damon and Mr. Zellen that the sports is more than just the athletic benefit that the kids are getting. A lot of these athletes, have done their best to try and stay active during these difficult times, and when they don't have their interaction with their cohorts, even in the academic worlds, having the sports is an opportunity for them to have a little bit of normalcy. And I understand the desire to want to wait for things to get back to what was normal, but rather I think we need to look forward to new ways to find the new normal, or as they're talking about, the next normal. So because this is something that the children can elect to participate in or not, I hope that it will be considered to find ways to make it safe, to make it modified, and to allow these children the opportunity for so many reasons beyond just the physical and the emotional. I know that there is the potential, just like our district gets to determine whether or not we participate, other districts may also choose to not participate, which could affect those towns that are part of our conference and division. But despite that, I hope that even if the kids just are able to get together for modified activity with their teammates to be able to scrimmage or that type of thing, and I wouldn't want to have it be an all or nothing. Even if they can't compete, I hope they will still be able to participate in some fashion and have that opportunity. Thank you. I appreciate all that you guys have done with all of these decisions during this unprecedented and difficult time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Cynthia, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, it's Eloise. I'm sorry, I'm still getting tech savvy with our computer.
That's okay.
My son, but definitely we love sports. We thrive on it. And I think there are ways. We're all intelligent people. The kids, we've done little mini pod that, because it's been so difficult for the kids, I think they have to have some things that are regular and, good for the body and seeing each other, I agree with all the people that added to that. We're all friends. They need to see each other in that normal space and also feel the fresh air, which is great for the immune system. We all know healthy food and all that stuff that just makes them as amazing as they can be and have been. And we have amazing fields. There's no reason to use them. I don't know how, would organize. You'd have to go by the rules and, but so far, we've managed to kind of, keep some of the kids busy or, we can't not do sports. You can't tell I'm an athlete now, but I look like a bag of balls, but I lived through some years. But anyway, they need it, they got to have something that's healthy and keeps their immune system going and all that stuff. Right. So, I highly if I am needed to coach, I know a lot of sports. I'm loving with kids and love to see them have fun and succeed in whatever way that gets organized. They've been using the Wilson fields a little bit, as probably. I know my dad taught over there. That's an amazing. There's amazing places to play as long as the kids know that it's serious, because otherwise they would have been back in school or what. So it's all like something we're all experiencing together, and they really need that. We all need that thing to keep you healthy and so they could see each other in a fun way too, right? To kind of counter the trauma that's happened. And, I think it's absolutely necessary.
Okay, thank you. I think we just lost you just a little bit, or you shut off. Okay. I see Dodrills. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I just want to reiterate or agree with pretty much all the parents that have gone before me. I have an incoming junior whose a large part of his identity is his socialization and his sports. He's a two-sport athlete, he plays soccer and basketball. I wrote to all of you previously, and we were all pretty devastated when the decision to go remote was made. He is particularly heartbroken as he is a very social kid. I'm sure most 16-year-olds are. But the biggest thing for me was when we closed down in the spring and went remote, my kid didn't get out of bed for over 2 months for all intents and purposes. And I am scared to death what will happen in a few weeks if he literally has nothing again. Junior year is really, really important too. I'm sure every year is important. All kids are important. I don't want to downplay any of that, but he was really looking forward to junior year and starting to think about college and what athletics in college might look like. It really means a lot to him. So thank you again for all of what you do. I can't imagine dealing with all of this on your end, and appreciate the time and effort. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I have Galaxy S8.
Oh, that's me. This is Lori McLaughlin. Sorry, my name didn't pop up. I'm also in favor of sports, and I have a slightly different perspective to share that might be useful. My daughter is going to be a sophomore, and I have a senior this year. This summer, my daughter has been involved in a very successful travel softball program that I've been able to watch all the kids adapt. And they are really, really just wanting to play so bad that they'll do whatever is told to them. They'll wear their masks, they wash their hands, they stay away from each other. And it's amazing to see that they'll do whatever just so they have the opportunity to play. I know the same is true for some of the baseball locally that has happened. So I think it can be done and done safely. So, and also thank you to all your work you've been doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I'm Jessica Heber. I have a incoming junior. I did also send an email about the athletics. My son plays soccer. He's played basketball. If given the opportunity this year, he would probably play baseball as well. I just wanted to follow everybody else and say that athletics are an important part. They've already lost so much with not being able to go to school. And considering that it is kind of voluntary, depending by family, it would be great if they were given that option. And I also appreciate everything you guys are doing. It's not a easy situation, but I just wanted to put in my opinion for athletics. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't see any more hands raised. And we've got a couple more minutes, but it's looking like we are done. So, all right, we're going to close it down with sports and open it up to the SRO or to any other thing that someone would like to speak about for the next 20 minutes. Sean?
Okay, thank you.
I've got to do Kelly Brown. Can I just have Kelly, who's been waiting and stepped back so we could finish? I promise you will be next.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Kelly.
Thank you. My name is Kelly Brown, and I'm the parent of a 4-year-old about to enter his 3rd year in preschool. Just trying to move my camera so I can see Lori's clock. Okay. I might be repeating some of the statements that I've previously made. However, I'll continue to advocate for my child until his educational needs are addressed. So I just want to make that clear. We're currently 3 weeks away from beginning the 2020-2021 school year, and I'm becoming increasingly frustrated by the lack of information regarding our children's education. I will only speak about my experience as the parent of a preschooler, but I can assume other parents are feeling similarly based on personal conversations. To begin with, I still have not had the opportunity to be engaged in a meeting regarding preschool with actual information. The first preschool meeting was held so closely following the model decision that it ended up being a meeting with more questions than answers. Last night's meeting for Maple Street School was geared to kindergarten and up. Preschool is again and still getting passed over. This is unfair for my child and myself as we are preparing to support his teachers with his learning in the upcoming year. Here are some of the things that I don't know yet. His teacher, his schedule, including what days of the week and what times of day will he need to be home from childcare because he is not at a setting that he can access his remote learning. If he needs to be live any specific times of day, how will his handouts and work be given out? How will communication with his teacher and specialists occur? Are tablets, as mentioned, still being purchased for preschoolers? And if so, when are they arriving? The most recent update from Superintendent Leclerc only mentioned the laptops for older students. What online programming should we be getting prepared to use? What attendance is going to look like? My son also has special needs, so additional questions are, how will his services be met through a remote model? Will we be bringing him to Maple Street or the high school? How will he meet with his specialists? How are his assignments going to be adjusted? How are services that are contracted being supported? These questions are, I know, specific to my child, but what I hope they exemplify is the lack of communication, the frustration and fear I have for the start of the school year.
Thank you. Thank you. Sean?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. My name is Sean Sheehan, and I'm a science teacher at Easthampton High School. I feel very fortunate to have been part of the school system for 21 years, right out of graduate school, and I've enjoyed working with the students. It has been a challenging time to be a superintendent, school committee member, mayor, principal, vice principal, educator, and school support staff member. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Leclerc, Mayor LaChapelle, Cindy Kwasinski, Maren Goldstein, Lori Garcia, Shannon Dunham, Marissa Carey, Jonathan Schmidt, Bill Evans, and Sue Wilson for their hard work in attending numerous Zoom meetings and hearing the concerns of parents, students, and staff members and making the difficult decisions. You have listened to our concerns and have created comprehensive reopening plans based on the science of the virus and the safety of the school community. I want to go back to teaching and the beautiful state-of-the-art lab space at the high school because teaching is my calling and my colleagues feel the same way. But I want to do it when it is safe. We have already lost too many to COVID-19. I also want to see sports and extracurriculars this year because it's important. And thank you again for all that you do.
Thank you. Lauren David?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Lauren Davin. I'm a homeowner on West Street in Easthampton with twin boys who will be entering the 5th grade. I feel compelled to express my disgust and utter disappointment that our community leadership would file a waiver to remove a valuable member of our school community, our school resource officer. It seems backwards that public input is now being solicited only after a decision has already been made to file this waiver. Regardless, please let the record reflect that my family is not in support of this short-sighted decision. And this school committee has let us down yet again by prioritizing politics over our children. Young people are navigating a complex world and need a lot of support and guidance as they grow. Developmental research clearly shows that having one or more caring adults in a child's life increases the likelihood that they will flourish and become positive adults themselves. A school resource officer is just another positive adult role model that a student can choose to connect with throughout their time in the Easthampton Public Schools. I urge you not to eliminate this position from the building and take away a positive adult mentor and advocate. If a child doesn't want to connect with our school resource officer, quite simply, they don't have to. They are never assigned to them or required to interact. Instead, I'd like to see our schools promote an environment of mutual respect and encourage our students to learn how to live in a world with all different people instead of demand that we eliminate those we don't like. At a time when our resources are limited, our budgets are tight, and our students need all the support they can get, it seems illogical to remove a grant-funded position designed to support our young people. As school committee members, you have been elected by the residents of Easthampton and entrusted to oversee our school system. Your role is to ensure that this district is responsive to the values, beliefs, and priorities of our community. I implore you to make careful decisions that are best for the majority of students and not merely appease the loudest voice or fall for the latest trends. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah Amoroso?
Hi. I wanted to speak quickly on the ongoing negotiations, which I know you can't comment on, regarding teacher working conditions. It's important to me as a parent that our teachers are as safe as our children. And considering the condition of our buildings, considering the unknowns ahead, I think that it's very unfair to require teachers to be in buildings if they can do their work from home more safely. I know that some might need to be in the buildings, right? Particularly lab teachers or other people who want to use their equipment, whatever. But I think that it's important that we provide them the flexibility to care for themselves, their own families, and our own children. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sue Mason?
Good evening. My name is Sue Mason, and I'm a resident of Easthampton and a teacher at Easthampton High School. I really want to take this opportunity to express my gratitude and my thanks to the school committee, to Superintendent Leclerc, to Mayor LaChapelle for your tireless work to come up with a comprehensive and safe remote opening plan for the schools of Easthampton. I know this has not been easy for you. I realize you have spent countless hours and more in Zoom meetings. During this time, you've really listened to everyone, you've weighed in with compassion, and you've tried to balance the needs of the community in a fair and just manner. I can't thank you enough for all that you do. I'm sure none of you could have imagined this, being in this situation. These are unprecedented times, and believe me, as an educator, I long for the time when I can be back in my classroom with my students. But until then, I want people to really understand that the teachers are going to work really hard to meet the needs of the students, the families, and the community. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Joe W.
Hello, everyone. How are you? I just want to voice my opinion about the SOR officer. I have spoken with my daughter, who is going to be a sophomore at Easthampton High School. Her concerns is that she will not feel safe without them. She also believes that it's in her words as a sophomore, this is more of a political thing than it is anything else. I'm asking for one that if this doesn't come to a vote, that we have a public vote on this. Let the parents ask their kids that are afraid to come up and be approachable in front of this type of forum because they don't want to be seen down by the adults. I'm also asking that it's reconsidered, that the kids can somehow be involved or a less threatening scenario for them. I believe it's a great thing. The kids can have this outlet, have a positive view, and not be politically driven about what's being gone across this whole nation. With that being said, thank you for all your hard work. I know it's got to be incredibly difficult to be going through this. But we also have to listen to our kids. And from what I've heard from the ones that I've talked to and her friends, they think it's a great idea that the officer should stay. Thank you.
Thank you. Myra?
Good evening. I just have a few comments. Again, there's a lot of time that's going into planning. And given the new DESE guidance, I feel for the teachers and the staff that may have to be anticipated to be in the buildings remotely. And there's been a lot of questions. I know we have more questions than we do have answers. So on that being said about questions, I am very happily going to be listening to the presentation about the school resource officer with open mind about what his current duties are, as well as what office, I'm not sure what to call you, Officer Rick, what additional things that he does and brings to the school. I'd also like people to be open-minded, to be thinking about what are the intentional outcomes of the school resource officer and effects, as well as what are the unintentional outcomes and effects of a school resource officer. And knowing that this review is going to be driven by data, the waiver is going to be driven by data and numbers. And I think that is an efficacious way to look at this situation and also see what Officer Rick is bringing to the school and what resources that he is supplying. And also, I've heard about many things that you do, Officer Rick, such as being on the student support team. And so my question about that is kind of in line with FERPA. Where does that, how is that impacted? Yeah, so I guess I'm not sure if you can answer all those questions in your presentation, but I do look forward to hearing from you about it.
Thank you. Amber Broussard.
Yes, hi. I'm Amber Broussard. I'm going to keep it short. I'm just here. My daughter is going to be a second grader at Center Pepin. And I'm just here really to voice that I really support the school resource officer. I have worked at Northampton High School before and worked with the school resource officer there. He was a great guy. I know Rick, and he's also a great guy. And I'm just here to show support. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Carrie, you did speak about sports, but we still have some time, so I don't see a reason why you can't speak about the SRO or whatever else it was that you needed.
Thanks. Good evening again. Yes, I'm speaking in support of the SRO position. I want to echo Lauren's comments. We have 4 children in the district. We've lived in Easthampton for 15 years, and I'll never forget the day of not even dropping my children off, driving by the school the Monday after the Sandy Hook event, and having the feeling of safety and security that my children are going into a school where there was an officer there in case anything happened. And I particularly remember writing that day saying it helped me feel a little bit better that day. It's a resource officer. It's a grant-funded position. I think our children deserve it. I think the fact that the state is saying maybe you need another one with this nice big school going in, it's a resource our kids lean on as families. We rely on it. And I'm speaking in high support of the school resource officer position, and I implore you to maintain those roles and add the role if the state deems appropriate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else. I'm going to scroll through one more time. Kind of going, gone, but I haven't scrolled through all the way.
Cynthia?
I see Amy.
Okay, Amy.
Can you see me?
Amy.
Hi, thanks for hearing me. Thanks for all the work that you've all done. I am also in support of fall sports, so hoping that comes out well. I'm in support of full remote classrooms, so I'm so glad that that was a choice that you all made as well. And I thank you all so much for all the work that you've done. I just want to remind folks that I know that Officer Rogalski is a great guy. I've heard that over and over again. But a few years ago, we did go through some really traumatic events surrounding a school resource officer, and the resulting report and investigation from the state attorney general reminded us that we need to have some very strong rules built in regarding that. So if we do decide to keep the school resource officer, I would ask that that be looked at really carefully and build in some safeguards that are going to protect those students who do feel traumatized and threatened by a police presence in their school. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I am looking through and it is looking as though we are pretty much done. Stephanie Fleury.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Fleury. I've lived in Easthampton for 14 years and I work at Maple School. I would like to just convey my gratitude and thanks to the school committee, Mayor LaChapelle, and Dr. Leclerc for all of your hard work. The sheer number of hours you have all put in and spent thinking about what's best for students and educators alike has been an enormous undertaking, and you all have done a great job. And I just wanted to weigh in a little bit on the SRO. I do think that it is important to think about, as the last speaker was saying, those who may not have a good experience with the SRO. And while they may be a minority in our schools, they are required to be in our buildings. And I think that it's important to consider them when we're requiring students to be in the buildings. SRO officers are not required to be there, but we do need to make sure that we think about all of our students when making that decision. And I know that you all will think about that, but I just wanted to echo that last statement.
Thank you. And we have 2 more minutes, so if you're going to speak, it's time now. I'm seeing no one. Last time through. All right. Going, gone. All right, we're going to close public speak. Thank you for your comments. Now we're going to begin with our presentation. Dr. Leclerc, did you want to say anything before we do this? Do you want to introduce the presentation we're going to have?
Yes, thank you. I would love to. So we're going to have a presentation on the school resource officer now. I think that if you have been in our meetings, Rick had a statement, Officer Rogalski, our SRO, had a statement a few weeks ago, and we just trying to be mindful of giving everyone a fair amount of time. He wasn't able really to complete it. And just for a point of reference, and Officer Rick may let everyone know that we originally had a presentation scheduled for our school resource officer back in the spring when we were still meeting face to face. We try to have presentations scheduled throughout the year when we're meeting face to face. And when COVID happened, obviously that kind of put to the side. I know that this has been a challenging issue in the last few months. I have expressed publicly and to the police department that I am in support of a school resource officer, and I base that on my previous experiences as an educator. I've worked with several school resource officers, both as a teacher and as an administrator, and I've found them to be invaluable. And I know to Amy's point, who spoke a few minutes ago, there were challenges in Easthampton a few years ago, and we have really worked hard to shift some of our thinking around how we utilize school resource officers. And I would point out that we have a model policy for police officers in school that we worked on collaboratively with the Attorney General's office. And after that policy was approved, we were told that it was a model policy in the state of Massachusetts. We've also upgraded our school resource officer roles and responsibilities since I've come on board. And again, working in collaboration with key staff such as the school resource officer, the police department, and the Attorney General's office. So we've made a lot of inroads. Could we do more? Absolutely, we can always learn. But I think that I hope people will give Rick's presentation tonight the time that it deserves and treat it with an open mind as we start down this path. And I'm always willing to learn and work on doing things better and more productively. So, Officer Rick, welcome.
Before Rick begins, I know Chief Alberti wanted to say something about the police. The chief is
Alberti,
yep.
Welcome.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bob Alberti. I'm your police chief. I'd like to thank the school committee for this opportunity to have our officers introduce this very important and very informative SRO presentation. They will highlight the amazing work that they are passionate about in a program that's been in place my entire career. But that being said, to echo what Dr. Leclerc just said, we can all do better. I certainly would like to take this opportunity to thank the school committee for their hard work, due diligence, and endless thoughtfulness for our children in the city. A significant percentage of my police officers have children in this school district and live in the city. Your police department loves our Easthampton community, our school committee, and especially our children. The community is the police, and the police is the community. We've echoed that and said it time and time again. But our goal here with the city and city policing in Easthampton is common humanity. So without taking up any more valuable time in this committee, I'd like to introduce SRO Detective Rick Rogalski, followed by Officer Mickey Cici, who will introduce himself. And thank you, everybody, for your time and your attention to this. We really do appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You ready for me?
Yes.
Thank you for this opportunity. I didn't really have a chance last time during public speak to introduce myself. My name's Rick Rogalski. I've been a police officer here in Easthampton for 26 years. I've been a resident of Easthampton since 1994, also 26 years. I'm the father of 5. I have children from 24 down to 10, 2 boys and 3 girls. I started my role as the SRO in 2017, September, and have grown in that role and am absolutely passionate about what I do and love what I do and wake up every day looking forward to going to work and working with the children in the schools and the young adults and the staff and everything. So I'm going to repeat a lot of what I rushed through last time. So to the question of what is a school resource officer, and again, I'm using a federal definition. It's a career law enforcement officer with sworn authority who is deployed by an employing police department or agency in a community-oriented policing assignment to work in collaboration with one or more schools. NASRO, which is the National Association of School Resource Officers, recommends that agencies select officers carefully for SRO assignments and that officers receive at least 40 hours of specialized training in policing before being assigned. And like I said last time, I've been through the 40-hour basic SRO class and the 24-hour advanced SRO class. The 2014 Task Force Report on School Safety and Security, which was under Governor Patrick Duvall, defines an SRO as a commissioned law enforcement officer who is specially trained to work within a school community to prevent and respond to unlawful behavior, including disorderly or violent acts. And SRO roles include educator, informal counselor, and law enforcement officer. Also, that comes partially from the NASRO triad concept, which is guest lecturer, informal counselor, mentor, and law enforcement officer. So what are the roles of a school resource officer? again by NASRO. The goals of a well-funded SRO program include providing safe learning environments in our nation's schools, providing valuable resources to school staff members, fostering positive relationships with youth, developing strategies to resolve problems affecting youth, and protecting all students so they can reach their fullest potential. And going back to the report from 2014 under Governor Deval Patrick, a school resource officer can play a key role in keeping a school both physically and psychologically safe through balancing the three roles of educator, informal counselor, and law enforcement officer. Due to their key roles in school safety, SROs should have experience as a patrol officer and be properly selected and trained for work in schools at the secondary level. The selection process works best when shared by the superintendent and police chief, which I believe has happened in this instance. Traits of an effective school officer, also from that report: truly enjoys working with students and has a deep commitment to helping them, applies crisis intervention training and skills to help students in crisis, builds positive relationships with students, staff, and parents, both to support students individually and to strengthen cooperation between the school community and the police department, supports students while following through on his or her law enforcement duties, always treats students and parents with respect, and is ready to take as much time as needed to listen and explain patiently to students and parents the reasons for his or her actions, knows about options beyond arrest and follows through on them when appropriate and safe, becomes an integral part of the school staff, especially as an active member of the school's crisis response team, shares knowledge of first responder procedures and protocol, and has a proven ability to work hard, be dependable, and possess high integrity with minimal supervision. The SRO displayed these traits while serving as a patrol officer. So what do I do in the schools? Most of my time is spent on the building relationships, the informal counselor mentor part of the triad. Prior to becoming the SRO, I've been in coaching through youth coaching in the youth, coaching at the high school. And that's where I really loved or began to love the interaction with the youth and helping them and giving them stuff that I wish I had been given when I was growing up and playing sports. In the schools, I do not discipline students. I know a lot of people think that's the case. I don't suspend students. I don't expel students or give detentions. If I see a student, unless it's something that I need to intercede in, I do what teachers do. I report to the administration and they handle the school discipline. The only time I get involved, not in school discipline, but when they bring me in, is if what they did in school constitutes a violation of the law, then they'll bring me in, and a lot of times we'll have parallel investigations. I am a member of the SST, the student support team at both the high school and Whitebrook Middle School. I know someone asked a question about FERPA. We share information with each other. I am considered a staff member at the school, but I don't share that information outside the school. So that's sharing between myself and the school. I also, in my role as in the SST, I can bring information to the administration and the SST when there's police involvement outside of the school, and it may affect the student in the school or the school climate. We talk about those things during an SST meeting, and we support the student, and we work together to give the supports the student needs in those situations. I'm involved with Jan Norman's STRAT program, which is Students and Teachers Raising Awareness Together. We meet every Friday. It's mostly about bullying, but we do talk about other things. I teach DARE at Whitebrook to the 5th grade. I've been in the physics class and taught things around my training as a crash reconstructionist. We skid cars out at the park. We do measurements. We work with equations and go through a crash and help the kids figure out the speed of the vehicle prior to the crash. Prior to the elimination of the health teacher position at Whitebrook, I did present in the health class. On most days, I'm in front of EHS before and after school, greeting the students with the principal and assistant principal. I'm always looking for ways to ensure the safety of the students and staff through crime prevention, through environmental design, which is SEPTED. That's looking at the building and finding ways like signage and labeling the classrooms and stuff like that. So in case of an emergency, it's easier to identify where that emergency is. I'm part of the safety team at all the schools. I've spoken in the We the People class mainly about search and seizure while they're preparing for their competitions. And I work with students and parents around issues that may arise in or out of school, contacting parents after school hours, having conversations with them and their child about things that may be going on. In addition to my work in the schools, I'm also a member of the SRO training board, and that board includes other SROs, the Mass Police Training Council, ADAs, and people from the mental health community. And our role is to work on requirements to get SROs certified in the state of Massachusetts. And that was due to break out at the juvenile police officer conference this past winter, but that has been postponed twice now due to COVID. I'm an executive board member for the Massachusetts DARE. I'm also on the executive committee for the Easthampton Healthy Youth Coalition. I know I touched on this, but since being appointed in 2017, I've only filed charges against one student with the sole outcome being diversion through the DA's office. And for those that aren't familiar with diversion, when you file charges and you divert the student or the juvenile, they go through a program, and once the program's completed, they're never arraigned on the charges. They have no criminal record. The school to prison pipeline, my understanding of that is the complaint or how that arose is police officers in the schools charging students with school issues that were normally handled by school administrators. I know for sure that doesn't happen in Easthampton. And a lot of our training is involved around how to help these students without getting them involved in the criminal justice training or criminal justice, juvenile criminal justice system. There's a bunch of studies out there that show the more involved juveniles get in the criminal justice system, the more likely they are to offend as adults. So our goal is to keep them out of the criminal justice system as much as possible. DARE. I know at the last meeting where we talked, somebody brought up studies that say DARE is ineffective, and they're correct if they're talking about the old DARE program. The current DARE program has been revamped. Let me get to my DARE thing. So, okay. So I teach at the 5th grade right now, and it's a Keeping It Real program. That program was put together in conjunction with Penn State University. The curriculum is designed based on the socio-emotional learning theory. It identifies fundamental basic skills, developmental process needed for healthy development, including self-awareness and management, responsible decision-making, understanding others, relationships and communication skills, and handling responsibilities and challenges. It's also Common Core certified. The SEL theory teaches youth to control their impulses and think about risks and consequences, resulting in more responsible choices. So that's the new DARE program. I know the old one was drugs, 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 stand up there and lecture. The new program, the only drugs I talk about in the program are alcohol and tobacco. There is a module on marijuana if that comes up. It hasn't come up yet. The DARE program is 10 lessons that build upon each other. And involves interaction and role playing with the students, and it really gets them involved in learning how to make healthy and responsible decisions. As far as uncomfortable students with an SRO, I think I hear that. I totally hear that. And I think we'd be better served finding out why they're uncomfortable with an SRO, sitting with them, working out why they're uncomfortable, because there's many reasons. They maybe their only interactions with a police officer have been negative. Maybe their parents don't like police, so they don't like police. Maybe they watch the TV too much. There's many reasons, but I think we should core those down and really work with those students and try to build that relationship and build that trust with them. I think removing the SRO is only going to exacerbate those problems going forward. I think there's some confusion after listening to people about the funding. So my position is funded by the police department. The additional SRO is funded through a grant through the CROPS program.
This is already enough. There's just nothing.
Can somebody turn off their mic? Everybody make sure their mic is off except for Rick, please.
So none of the funding comes from the school budget. I know there's something in the MOU about the school potentially paying for some of my training. Speaking of training, I emailed a list of trainings I've been to. I don't know if everybody got it. I think it'd take too long to go through them. If anybody has any questions about that training, they can certainly ask. And I know in the last meeting, a parent brought up that what if Bob isn't the chief and I'm not the SRO and we get an SRO we don't like? Well, in our MOU, the program is reviewed yearly. We sit down with the superintendent, all the building administrators, and we go over what happened in the last year, where we think we can get better. And to echo the chief, I'm always looking to do better at my job. I love my job and I just want to be the best at it. And I think what we've done in Easthampton and are continuing to do with the program, we could be a paradigm for other schools and districts to follow. So with that said, that pretty much wraps up my presentation. Are there any questions, or we can hold them till the end? So
why don't we hear from Mitch first, and then
can I just say a few things before Mitch gets on? So when I was informed that we were awarded the grant, I was really excited, because as my role as the SRO, I'm spread pretty thin between all the schools. Most of my time is spent at the high school. A portion of my time is spent at Whitebrook, and I'm usually only at the elementary schools if called upon to be there, with the exception of the beginning of the year if they're having issues with drop-off or pickup. So when the chief told me that we got the grant money, I was really excited. And I asked the chief who, if anybody, was interested. And when he told me Mitch, I was super excited, because Mitch is exactly the right person for that position. He's been a police officer for a long time. He's worked with the community in Northampton. He's been an SRO. He's a great guy. He listens. He has empathy. He's the perfect person for the position. So with that said, Mitch, you're up.
Thank you, Rick. Well, good evening. My name's Mitch Seeke. I'm a police officer for the city of Easthampton. I know there's a lot of people that do not know me, so hopefully after tonight you'll get to know me a little bit more on a personal level. I want to first thank you for letting us present tonight. I began a 30-year career in law enforcement when the newest technology was that of a pager system. It was a time when police officers I worked with were retiring, most of which started during the Serpico era, a time when a great deal of police reform had occurred. I started police work in the small towns of Williamsburg and Goshen. I knew early on I would be looking for more out of a career in law enforcement. I applied for a job with the city of Northampton. Growing up in a small town, this posed some interesting challenges. At that time, I hadn't had much interaction with people of color, the LGBTQ community, the mentally disabled, or undocumented people. Everything was a learning experience. During the hiring process for Northampton, I had an interesting encounter during the psychological exam portion. They found I wasn't crazy, which was a relief, but the PhD in charge of the exam wrote some interesting things. I'm going to quote him. Mitch tends to base his judgments and opinions on his feelings more so than objective logic. This is not necessarily a weakness at all, since you are clearly considered to be self-reliant and tough-minded. This combination of characteristics are often found in community service officers or those who work well with youth. It was not long after his theory would get put to the test. In 1996, I volunteered for the Northampton Police Department's Community Services Bureau. My boss at the time was Brian Rust. Brian wanted to reinstitute an age-old philosophy of community policing in Northampton and show how police officers can break the mold from regular policing. I took on one of the most challenging areas, which was the low-income housing, or the projects as they were referred to back then. It was a complete eye-opener for me. The demographic was largely Hispanic and Black, with some Vietnamese and Korean residents. I soon learned that a rapport needed to be established, along with instilling trust-building exercises. This began with survey work that had to be printed in 4 different languages: English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Khmer. This, along with translation assistance, was provided to me by the Language Institute in Northampton. Things started out slowly, but gradually a bond of trust developed between us. I found it imperative to form collaborations with different organizations, such as Juvenile Probation, the Housing Authority, tenant groups, and social services, to name a few. By forming these alliances, I found it to be of paramount value. We could create alternatives to youth incarceration, work with tenants to prevent unnecessary evictions, work with youth during times of crisis, and provide a support system in a climate of drug abuse or domestic violence. This was not an easy task and often came at a high price. In 1996, Hampshire Heights was struck with a tragedy when a 6-year-old boy was struck and killed in the Surview parking lot adjacent to Hampshire Heights. Typically, an event like this can tear apart a family and a community. Resources were brought in for the family, necessary services were provided, and a basic bicycle safety program was implemented in honor of the boy killed. I've been fortunate enough to have received many awards, citations, and commendations for my work over the years, none of which is more satisfying to me than recognition from the community you work for. For almost a decade, I worked and supported the underprivileged, the undocumented, and people who do not have a voice. I helped to instill a sense of pride, belonging, and sense of worth to many people. It was very satisfying to me to enrich my life in such a way. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. The grant money for such work dried up. I'm still in contact with many of the youth, now full-grown adults, I worked with during that time through Facebook, texting, emails. I'm a godfather to one and often get invited to Jack and Jill parties, weddings, and family events. In 2002, I was offered a position as SRO for the Northampton High School, which I gladly accepted for 1-year term. The position reminded me that my own children were graduating middle school and entering high school. It was clear that this was to become my next focus. I left full-time policing to be a father, a businessman, and to become involved with the town politics and community endeavors. After seeing my children through high school and then college, my oldest son came to work for the Easthampton Police Department. He was very happy with his newfound family and said to me, "Dad, you need to work here." I've been watching Easthampton grow and change in a positive direction for many years. It was a chance to work in a new frontier for me, so I made an appointment with the chief for an interview. I had hoped that my reputation as a person who involves himself in the community would assist me in obtaining a position with the Easthampton Police Department. I was given a full-time appointment this summer. I've also applied for the second SRO position, which I hope comes to fruition. I feel that our youth deserves all the help and experience someone can offer. With a school system of nearly 1,500 kids, I feel their safety and well-being should be a priority in this country and world of unknowns. In closing, I would like to quote the Obama Foundation's My Brother's Keeper on the 6th milestone, keeping kids on track and giving them second chances. I believe in this. and hope the good people of Easthampton come to realize that part of the city's strength comes from bridging the gap between our youth and the police department. I also hope you recognize the value and accomplishments of our existing SRO. I will leave you with a pledge that I will commit 100% to this community, whether it's in the capacity of an SRO, school liaison officer, or community police officer. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? Maren?
I would just like to go back a little bit and get a couple numbers along with the questions and the points that Rick had pointed out, if that's possible. You had mentioned that there was only one time since 2017 that you've had to file any charges, and it was to put somebody into diversion, so they didn't have to go into the criminal court situation. However, you also mentioned the need to carry out parallel investigations if something was of criminal nature. And so I'm curious, two things. One is roughly, I'm not asking you to pull open your cases or anything like that, but how often in that time have you had to carry out parallel investigations and any kind of potential criminal investigations? And then I'm also curious, sort of along those same lines, if you could put a rough number, I'm curious how many times would you actually reach out and work with parents or students in situations that might have, you felt like, I think you mentioned were sort of events outside of school that they may look towards talking to an officer or getting some feedback, or that you need to reach out to those parents and talk to them. So both in terms of actual parallel investigations, and then also sort of a rough number of how often annually maybe you are working with parents or students on those kind of outside issues.
The parallel investigation, that actually happens quite a bit. But as you can see, only one of them has resulted in a criminal complaint being issued. Because a lot of times working with the administration, we feel that they're better served, the students, through the discipline in the high school rather than involving them in the criminal justice system. So it happens quite often because a lot of things, without getting into the details, do have criminal sides to them. But like I said, we discuss them, and for the betterment of the student, let the school handle the discipline, and I just do a small report and it gets filed away. As far as working with students and parents outside of the school, numbers, it's hard to say. It does happen. I'm still, even since COVID, I've been in contact with a couple of parents involving their students. Sometimes I get requests from parents to talk to their students. I've had requests from parents to scare their children, which I tell them I will absolutely not do. That's not my job to scare children. I'm not in the scaring children business, but I will certainly talk to any child about anything that's going on and give them the support and their families the support that they need. I could look into it and give you a more definitive number, but I don't have definitive numbers right now.
Okay, I just was curious in general. And just to clarify, again, just trying to understand your use of you in that kind of role. So you were the arresting officer in the incident in the parking lot, correct? So is that your one time that you've arrested somebody at Easthampton High School, or was that additional to that?
No, my statement said since becoming the SRO. I was not the SRO at that time.
Okay.
We had an SRO. That's actually a good argument to keep an SRO. I had none of the training I currently have. I haven't been through a lot of those trainings. I was a police officer at the time who was assigned as a liaison to the school at that time. So, I mean, that incident, I learned a lot of things. I grew as a police officer, and it really propelled me forward into really wanting to become the SRO. So,
Aaron, if I may.
Okay. Sure.
I just want to kind of piggyback what Rick said, but speaking to Marin's two questions. I know personally as a detective, which was a lot of years ago, that some of the parallel investigations that we did with the school district at the time were based on mandated reporting. So of course the DA's office was involved, and many of those cases clearly we could never discuss or talk about. But some of the parallel investigations that Rick's speaking to are generated from mandated reports from the school district, and which goes to the DA's office by way of a 51A, and then the police department. Whether or not there's an SRO in the school, those parallel investigations are still going to happen based on mandated reporting, which I'm sure everybody in this call is very familiar with. And part two is the arrest that you speak of at the time was Rick Rogalski. I had two officers because it was their district, Rick Rogalski and Todd Joseph, both were assigned to the school district. They were assigned to the high school, solely because they were the downtown cars. So there's a lot to be said, and we can certainly talk at length about that. But I think I'm in a better place. Rick's in a better place. We've all grown, and again, we can all do better, right? So to that particular incident, Rick is being very, very truthful in that he wasn't the SRO at the time. He was basically the district car handling a call. To Rick's point, that speaks to the positivity of a SRO, in that if the school district, if the high school or the middle school is calling the police, you're going to get a district car. As opposed to a very well-educated, very well-informed, very well-intended school resource officer such as Rick Rogalski or Mickey Siki.
Thank you very much for your clarification.
Marissa, you're on mute.
Yeah, just because I was on the committee during the Attorney General's investigation, this is something that just stays in the forefront of my mind. And so just a minute, sweetie, sorry, I've got my little one here. I would be really interested to hear, first, it sounds as though the implication here is that had Officer Rogalski had been acting as an SRO, perhaps he wouldn't have arrested the student at that time. I'm interested to learn what would make an SRO less likely to arrest someone than an ordinary police officer. But even more importantly, I would love to hear you describe some of that specific growth that you're talking about. What do you do now in our school buildings to make sure that our students of color do feel comfortable, given we are in a district that has just come out of an MOA with the Attorney General's office that found a culture and policy that was violating the civil rights of students of color in our buildings. So I would love to just hear you talk specifically about some of the things that you do for those minority populations. I totally hear that the majority of students feel really supported by the presence of the SRO, but what do you do for those minority kids?
As far as well, let's go back to an SRO and the incident. We didn't have an SRO in the building at that point. He was out injured. And I believe if he had been in the building, or currently me as the SRO, I don't think that incident would have happened, to be honest with you. I knew personally one of the people involved in that incident in 2017. I coached him. I had a relationship with him. And I think that had I known this issue was going on, I could have spoken to him and we could have worked things out before it got to that point. As far as working with the minority population, a number of my close relationships are with BIPOC students. One student in particular, I just took a moment to have a conversation with him. And ever since then, he always wants to talk to me. We have conversations on a regular basis. When he was in summer school last year, during one of our previous conversations, he learned that I liked shepherd's pie. He was taking a cooking class in summer school and brought me a plate of shepherd's pie that he made in the class, which was really rewarding and kind of cool. So I'm still close with that student now. I've worked with the diversity person on presentations to parents. Her focus was on minority parents, but like with anything else, my role as a community member of the Healthy Youth Coalition, some of our biggest hurdles are how do we get those parents involved. And I know at least two of the presentations I worked with her on, we had a very low turnout. There was, I think, 6 parents at one and maybe 7 at the other. So I'm willing to work with any student. I was a member of the Spirit Council when that was in existence. It no longer is after those reports from the 2017 incident. But as far as specifically working with minority students, if given the opportunity, I would happily work side by side with them, especially if they're having issues with an officer in the schools, and why do they have those issues, and what can we do to work through those issues and make it a more positive thing for them.
Shannon? Sorry.
No, I was just going to follow up on.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask Rick about the BIPOC kids that he coached during football, in building those relationships and building trust with those kids at the time. And then the other part of it is that if we the police can't fix or build this trust if we're not present. So of course, one of the things that we advocate for during being in the schools during that time period is the fact that we're attempting to build trust, and we have built amazing trust, especially Rick's work in the schools. We've built that trust with the school community. And if we're not in the school community, I'm not exactly sure how we're supposed to build trust in that school community, which of course then parlays into our community at whole, at large. So it's twofold. Of course, we want to get to the kids and build trust with those kids early on, which still bridges into building trust, which we've worked so hard at my whole career with the community at whole. But so back to, I think Rick should talk a little bit about some of the kids that he coached during the time that he was a football coach and the BIPOC kids that were on his teams.
Yeah, I built really good relationships with those students that played football for me. Actually, the other two students involved in that 2017 incident actually played football their senior year after not having played at all in high school. One of those students, it came about because I talked to him in the hallway. He was obviously uncomfortable around me. I approached him in the hallway and said I heard that he was interested in playing football, and I told him we'd love to have him on the team if he really wanted to play. And from that moment forward, he sought me out. He showed me what he was doing for workouts, and we had a really good relationship from that point going forward. At one point, he walked out of school. I found him down near the center of town and sat with him at a picnic table for about 45 minutes, just having a conversation with him. And eventually he came back to school that day. He did leave the district before finishing the year. I'm still somewhat in contact with him. I also have other students that I've coached, 15, 20 years ago that were minority students that I still have a relationship with. And every time I see them, we have great talks. And one of our players last year was going through some stuff at home. And at one point I was in his living room having a conversation with him at like 6 o'clock at night because somebody had said he had made statements about harming himself. So yeah, I've built those relationships and try to maintain them and wish to do so going forward. The chief mentioned about being in the building. I know I've heard that before. Why do we have to be in the building? Why do we have to have an office there? what makes an SRO program successful is those daily contacts with the students. So if you remove an SRO from the building, it won't be an SRO anymore. It'll just be a police officer that is a liaison with the school, like the chief mentioned.
Shannon?
That was going to be my first question. Bob, can you come back on?
Bob?
So,
Go ahead, Shannon, I'm sorry.
okay, so we've been talking about a waiver to remove the person from the building, not the position. Now, are you saying that, Rick, you just said that the SRO, if you guys aren't in the building, you're no longer a school resource officer?
Yeah, because for that reason, what makes an SRO successful and the program successful is that daily interaction with staff and students.
So without that, we don't have an SRO at all?
Not in name. You'd have
I
a
guess-
liaison.
Okay,
Go
I
ahead,
still need
Chief,
to
sorry.
clarify this because I was not under that impression.
So I guess I have a follow-up question. I have a follow-up question to your question, Shannon. Not to you though,
Okay.
but to Dr. LeClaire. And I don't know the answer to this, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, Allison. So what is the status of the waiver?
I haven't submitted it yet. The chair of the school committee asked me to hold off on it. Cindy and I.
If I remember correctly, from the last, and this could be my my old memory. Did the school committee vote to push this off until October for another meeting? I forget where this all shook out.
We weren't going to make a decision until a later meeting. However, we
Okay.
wanted to start the process of it.
Okay,
And that's
got
why
it.
I'm asking the question, because of what Rick just said. You know, a few other questions have come up.
No, I'm tracking with you, Shannon. I'm under the same. So I was not sure where exactly we were all at.
So, you know, it was my understanding that the programs would still happen. You know, you would still be a part of the SST groups and, you know, still do the DARE program and all these other things. I mean, I don't think anybody expected those things to end. Like I was never asking to get rid of an SRO.
So these are logistical obstacles that I think would be better served in a very robust, lengthy dialogue. So two things: if the SRO waiver is put through, and this is my understanding of it from where I sit, if the SRO programs and the SRO positions plural are eliminated, Rick Rogalski will be operating as a detective in the police department, which is what he's currently a detective, but he's an SRO, so he's SRO/detective, and assigned specifically to juvenile issues within the detective bureau. And he's been doing that all summer. My detectives, I'm super shorthanded, and he's been a godsend during the summer to my detective bureau, who are overwhelmed and understaffed. So Rick would continue to do that work. Mickey Siki, on the other hand, in the confines of the grant, would still be doing work with the youth in the community and community policing, again within the four corners of the grant. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he's assigned to all of the school programs, because the school committee and the school district doesn't want a police officer in the school. So there's a whole bunch of moving parts, and there's a whole bunch of balls in the air with regard to Mickey Siki's granted position. Does that make sense?
Oh, it absolutely does. But I mean, like I said, I wasn't under the impression that we were eliminating the SRO. And so what you're saying is, if they're not in the building, you're eliminating the position?
I'm sorry, Shannon. I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize. So Allison's waiver to the state is to eliminate the SRO positions. Stop me if I'm wrong, Allison.
No.
I have my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, because I think
I'm not the chair.
Play me, Bob. Thanks. Go ahead, Lloyd.
I've been sending my hand up because I'm extremely concerned about this. And that evening, I expressed my concern multiple times. In fact, I said that I wasn't even going to vote, which was the first time in my history as a school committee member. And we were all trying to hear and understand, and I don't think anyone did. And Shannon has just expressed that. I spoke positively about my experiences as an educator for more than 25 years with SROs. I never wanted to eliminate SROs in our schools in Easthampton, and I was clear about that. And we didn't even know that night what we were voting on. And that's evident now. And I think that vote should just be nullified. And we have to take the time, as I said that night, many times, to really research this and understand what that waiver meant. And when I said it multiple times, and I said, I'm exhausted, I don't even want to talk about it now, because we are trying to create an educational system during a pandemic. And the fact that right now, people are saying, what did I vote for, is illustrative of why we shouldn't have that evening. And we tried to put it off until October, till we gained facts and evidence to really know what we were voting for. So now we have heard from numerous families in our community who are outraged that we voted to remove SROs. And we have school committee members that said we did that because we weren't sure what we were doing. The only reason I even voted, because I was told, and we can all look at the tapes on the computer, if we don't do it, we could have a state police put in. So I thought, okay, we're just putting off the decision so they don't move a state policeman into one of our schools, which wouldn't even matter now because students aren't going to be in the schools. But that's why I said, okay, because I didn't want a state policeman. I want these wonderful SROs that have been chosen for our district. So I take back my vote. I don't know if we can do that.
Can I finish?
Yes.
Thanks. It was my understanding that we were voting to move forward with looking into doing the waiver. That was my understanding on the vote that we were taking. That's why I'm asking the question right now.
But we all weren't sure, Shannon. It's not just you. It's like it was so pushed ahead. That's what happened that night.
If I may, one of the things that I said during the last meeting, I'll reiterate again, was that, and I mean this sincerely, I appreciate the work that this school committee is doing in these times. It's just, it's amazing. You guys have the utmost patience. The thing that's on the front burner clearly is the opening of the schools, and I know absolutely nothing about all of that stuff. And that's why I said, as far as the SRO goes, I was happy to, I'm going to maintain Rick Rogalski as my juvenile detective, and I'm going to maintain Mickey Siki as my community policing school resource officer liaison. And of course, Rick, obviously, in his capacity as a school resource officer, until the point that the school committee decides that they do or don't want to push that waiver through. And the reality is, the important thing for me, and I'm sure for everybody on this call, is the school reopening in a safe way. The SRO can't really function in the schools, of course, until the school's open, stating the obvious. So this was never a pressure issue for me as the police chief. I can't put a school resource officer in the school until school's open, right? I can't put the cart before the horse. So this was never an issue where I thought that we needed to vote on a waiver, file a waiver, and push forward to the State House that we want a waiver on an SRO when we've got a ton of time. That's why I was happy to hear that October, we'll look at this again in October and see where we're at. And then, and again, it's almost a moot point, but it's not a moot point because the schools aren't open. And again, I'm happy to do whatever the school committee decides, whatever the school community decides, whatever the community at large decides. We, the police, work for you. Whatever the committee, the community, and the school community decide, we're going to obviously honor those wishes. We're still going to work our asses off for you guys, although I probably shouldn't have said that. But we are. we're here for you. We are part of the fabric of this community. And again, I say the police of the community is police. We are nothing without the community, and we work hard to build those bridges. So whether or not, I guess to Lori's point, whether or not, the vote was to push forward this waiver, that's entirely up to your committee. I'm just here to say that we're here for you guys. Whatever we can do for you. You've already heard Rick's presentation. You've heard from Mickey Siki. I think they're two amazing police officers that both of my kids are grown. They're out of the school system. But I tell you right now, as a taxpaying resident of Easthampton, and as a father of children, those are exactly the two guys that are in the school. But that being said, I just wanted to point out that never from the police department was there any push for this to happen or not happen. I always anticipated that there's so much time to even get back in the brick and mortar of the schools. So hopefully I didn't just ramble.
Chief, I'd like to speak to that for a second. So Lori and I, the night that we took that vote, we're not happy with the whole, it just felt very chaotic and undone. And our understanding was that we were just voting to look into it, and that what we would be doing is when we got back into school, we would be surveying students and talking to them, and then giving a chance for that presentation. The reason why we called you back so quickly is because as soon as we had this meeting, the equity committee and the community as a whole really spoke to wanting to hear that presentation. So we brought it faster, but it still is our plan in October.
Yeah, so I'll speak to two things on that. And this is, having sat through that meeting, I'll speak to two things that I think. One is, I don't believe, and I could be wrong, we could go back and listen to the tapes, but or the minutes of the meeting, but my understanding was the school committee voted for Allison to move forward with the waiver. I don't know that there was any caveat there that wait till October. So that's something, Chairperson Krasinski, I think you should think about. And two, I think a big impact on one of the reasons that we're here was the presentation, and I'm sorry I missed it, Shannon, was the presentation that Rick and Mickey did with Shannon. I think that is a significant component as to why we're here. I think, and I don't speak for Shannon, but I think my assumption is, and I shouldn't assume, was that Shannon sat down with these two guys and said, wow, we need to really hear this out before we make a final decision on any of the above. And again, Shannon, I apologize, I don't want to speak for you, but I think that it's important that whatever marching orders that this committee gave to Allison, kind of puts her in a trick box to a little bit, because she's given march orders to file the waiver, but there was some confusion at the time that we'll start the waiver process, but we'll revisit it in October. But I don't know if she starts the waiver process, submits to the State House, and by September 1st, we're like, yeah, you have the waiver. Now what? And I don't know the answer to that. Now what?
It was very clear to me from the conversation that we were having with the mayor on that evening when we all took the vote, that the waiver frees the district from the state requirement. When you are required by the state to either have an SRO in your building, or the state will assign you a state police officer unless you have the waiver. My understanding at that point was that you could have a waiver and yet as a district under local control still elect to have an SRO in your building, that you just simply wouldn't be required by Boston to do it, but that locally you could. And so that was why we said move forward with the waiver, but then we can go through a public forum, we can hear from the Equity Steering Committee, and we can make a decision locally how we actually want to approach this. Generally, I would recommend that members of the committee who don't understand what we're voting on decline to vote or vote no if it's an action that moves forward.
I would suggest that my understanding, and speaking with the chief's attorney, my understanding of that is not the case, which is why before any movement was made there, I would definitely seek the school district's counsel.
If I may, real quick.
Jonathan, yeah.
I would like to echo what Marissa just said. That was also my understanding, was that we did vote to direct Allison to submit the waiver, but with the understanding that it was non-committal, but allowed us the flexibility to then make the decision without the state's requirements hanging over us. So that being said, it sounds like there is some confusion as to whether or not that is true. And I wonder if we should field a motion this evening to essentially vote to retract our previous vote, but then get that information clarified. Here. And I do have a question just generally for the SRO and potential SRO if we wanted to move.
Sure. Do you want to do your question first, and then we'll call on Maren and Rick?
Sure. So my primary question was going to be, and this is maybe a good opportunity for Officer Cici to talk. I'm curious to know if you have a vision for how the SRO in the lower grades might differ from the SRO in the high school, or if it's a lot of the same. Well, obviously, the fifth grade DARE program would maybe shift into your responsibilities, but is there anything else that you'd like to speak to that would be different? Because I feel like from the committee's perspective, we have two sort of decisions at hand. There's the grant-funded position and then the existing SRO position. I'd like to sort of distinguish them in my own mind a little bit.
Who would you like to speak on this?
Well, I can talk about what goes on at Whitebrook currently, and then Mitch could speak about what he envisions the position being.
Sure.
So at the new school, it's going to be a pre-K through 8 school. The SRO office is in the 6th through 8th grade because they're moving the 5th grade back down to the elementary level, which I think is an awesome idea and totally support that. So a majority of my time now at Whitebrook is with those age students. So, and the reason DARE at the 5th grade level, and I don't know if I mentioned it, but once those 5th graders hit 7th grade, I'd like to do the 7th grade DARE also, just to kind of reinforce the stuff that was taught in 5th grade. And the reason for that is prevention science shows that that's the age group that you have the most success with intervention programs and DARE itself. So, but yeah, SST is similar at both schools. I just spend most of my time at the high school because of time constraints and what's going on. So, Mitch, go ahead.
Well, never working in Easthampton school system poses a little bit of a challenge for me. I guess my first course of action would be a series of meetings with teachers and school administrators to find out what exactly their challenges are in those schools, gather that information, and then put together a course of action on how we can best serve.
Maren.
So I have a couple of questions still. I mean, the position was listed with a number of different roles, a number of different aspects, committees you sit on, things like that. So I would hazard a guess, and you can confirm that if there was a committee that's meeting around the new school building, and there's safety measures being discussed, you're going to be at that meeting, right? That you're on it. You're on that committee right now. You mentioned it the other night, and if that meets in September, you're going to be at the meeting discussing safety in the new school building. So I guess I do not think that this is quite so black and white as being presented, and I think it's I think that there would be from the listing of roles that you've spent, and are part of. It certainly sounds like there's a lot of different aspects that you do that are not just in the school, greeting students and being in the school halls. Like there's plenty of other things that you're doing and a part of. And so I would hazard that those still happen, whether the school is happening or not. Chief, maybe you want to speak to that. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, I was actually, I was going to inquire, Mayor, if that was a question directed at me. So if I understand what you're asking me, as far as the school building and the school building committee and the safety and security of the school, which you and I have both worked on, I suspect that we'll be involved in that regardless of the SRO. Because I think we're talking about two different things. We're talking about administrative versus operational, right? Does that make sense?
Well, I guess that gets to sort of a little bit of the question that I'm trying to mull through my mind. And this was definitely, what my perspective was last week and is still trying to understand. So there sounded like there's a whole bunch of different aspects of the job that has been put under the title SRO. And that has been my understanding in the past. It's certainly how the presentation was, I feel like today, last time, that there's all these different components they're sitting on. There's teaching DARE, there's teaching the different classes that you're doing, there's going to different committees, there's sitting on safety groups, there's all those different pieces.
Right.
And so in my mind, I just wonder again, and I know probably none of us work 40-hour work weeks, but in a 40-hour work week or whatever the average work week, and Rick, you can, you probably work a lot more than 40 hours. But anyway, like, what is the percentage of time you're in the school, in the hallways, talking to kids, doing that sort of social emotional support work versus all the other aspects of meeting, teaching, planning, safety, reviews, all those kinds of aspects?
So, Marion, I think so. I'll speak to this, and then of course Rick can jump in. But all of those things that you just described are all things that aren't going to happen if the SRO program goes away. You probably just made the best argument of anybody tonight why we have to have that program in there, because of all of those bullet points that you had stated that we do. But to that end, some of the stuff that we're talking about it falls upon me, falls upon Detective Sergeant Mark Popolarczyk, who is in charge of the SRO program and the Detective Bureau from an administrative standpoint. And we do a significant amount of administrative work for the school district, and I'm sure Allison would back me up on that. We spend a tremendous amount of time administratively with the school district, to probably the top half of your bullet points, and then the bottom half of your bullet points would be what Rick does, which he can't do by himself, which is why we applied for the grant in the first place. Rick is getting torn between currently, so let's look at last school year. He's torn between the high school, the middle school at Whitebrook, and the elementary schools. So whenever issues arise, or even calls come in for that matter, rather than sending the district car that we spoke to earlier, Rick would respond to Maple Street, Center, Pepin. He would leave the high school or Whitebrook to go to those schools to do all the things that you were just describing about spending time with those kids and spending time in the hallways. And listen, I go back to the same comment I said earlier. How can we build trust with the kids in the school and the community, in the school community, if we're not there? And like, for me, it's relatively rudimentary. Everybody talks about building trust. And I'm gonna go a little bit global here. Everybody speaks to building trust with the police, and the police building trust with the community. We can't build trust with the community if we're not there. We've had an SRO position in the school district for my entire career. There have been pitfalls for sure. There's been ebbs and flows for sure. I think overall, over the period of time that we've been there, the school district and the kids were better served for us being there. But I think, and I don't want to drift too much off of your question, Maren. I just think that your question is there's a couple parts to it. But administratively, we support Rick. He's undermanned. He's one person. That's why we applied for the grant in a significant school district. So I'll defer now to Rick to speak to how much time he's putting in with, to your question, with the kids themselves. And Allison, feel free to jump in about the administrative part, that the behind the scenes stuff that nobody ever sees.
The most important work I do, and a majority of the work I do, is the in-school talking to students, building those relationships. The other stuff happens most, like the SST stuff, the Strat group with the Jan Norman and the DARE stuff, that happens within the school day. Typically, I'm doing the DARE twice a week because of the length of time that special is in session. So in order to get in all 10 lessons, it's twice a week, and then that leaves me some room if something comes up with another school during the time I'm supposed to be teaching DARE. So yeah, most of the work I do, and the most important work I do, and DARE is part of that relationship building. I get to know these fifth graders pretty well and build relationships with them during the time we spend together. Does that answer your question? The other stuff is minimal. The DARE executive board member thing is probably about twice a year. The SRO training board before COVID was once a month. The executive committee for the Healthy Youth Coalition is about once a month. It's a little more now because we're doing some stuff. We're trying to get some stuff solidified with the grant and the shift from the schools to the city.
Can I just add a few things?
Sure.
I can talk about the administrative side of it, but before I do that, I would also say that, beyond a normal school day, I see Rick out at bus duty in the morning, not because he's actually on duty, but because he's out there to make connections with kids and to have an adult that they're hearing good morning from. And he's there at the end of the day. He's there if any of you have gone to athletic events, I can speak personally. I see him just about at every basketball game. He doesn't have a child playing on the team. He's there to support our Easthampton kids. And very often I see him in the Easthampton kids section with his own children that he's brought to the game. So, he's not an officer on duty. He's there to support the kids. From an administrative kind of behind the scenes, as the chief mentioned, Rick meets with our leadership team. He works with them. He helps develop safety protocols in their buildings. He helps to ensure that the teachers feel safe with doing emergency drills. He does trainings. He does one-on-one with teachers that request it, just to make sure they really feel safe and comfortable. Emergency drills are part of life today, and it's very helpful to have a familiar face when you are dealing with some of those anxiety-producing scenarios. I would also say that, beyond the assisting with the new school building, behind the scenes kind of safety stuff that we really won't go into. Rick has assisted me. I look at every quarry and every fingerprint that comes through the district for staff, for volunteers, for coaches. Once in a while I have questions, and it's nice to be able to call someone and say, can you explain this to me? Can you let me know, what your recommendation is? And I do that. It's also nice to have a connection at the police department when you are, as an administrator, receiving bad news about a student or a family in your community. when you pick up the phone and an officer that you know well, that's part of your school community, tells you about something very traumatic that happened, it gives you a frame of reference that I think is very important for us to do what we need to do next, whatever that may be, convene a crisis team or anything like that. It's important to have that relationship with our officers. So those are just a few examples. I could go on, but I won't belabor the point because we're running late and I know we have a lot more agenda to get to.
Right. So I just wanted to say a couple of things. You know, Rick sent us all the trainings that he's done. And I, as a teacher, am on the student support team at my school. And I'm not sure the community understands just how important that role is of having you on the team. The whole purpose of a student support team is really to talk about healing and talk about meeting the needs of a student. And the work there and the function of an SRO in that team is really to work with everybody and come up with a picture of what that student needs and then start to, as a team, implement it. So when I look at all Rick's trainings, they're really exciting. A lot of them I've had for the same reasons, but some of them are just go way beyond, and I wish I had taken them all. So we had a lot of confusion. Part of the confusion is, yes, I agree with Jonathan and Marissa. We were under the impression that you could file a waiver and not use it. And it appears that there's some question as to whether or not that's even true. It may just be a misunderstanding, and it is possible, but that I can tell you was the only reason that I went along with what was going on, because I fully wanted a chance for the SRO presentation to occur and for surveys with the kids to occur and for time to go by so that we could actually think about this when we were not so inundated with everything else. So I think that what I'm hearing from everybody or most people is that what we thought may not be true in terms of not having to use the waiver, and people may not have understood all the different things that the SROs actually do in a school. And so Jonathan had asked whether or not we make a motion to just take that back, and Lori had tossed that out, take that vote back, and approach this at another time when school has begun. We have clearer heads, not such a long meeting ahead of us, and really time to give it, again, and I think I said this last time, the attention that it really deserves. So is there any discussion about that, or should we make a motion and see how people feel about that?
I don't want this to get swept under the rug, Cindy.
Under the rug?
I don't want to take the vote back and it gets swept under the rug. I'm afraid that's going to happen in the chaos of what's happening right now.
Oh, okay. I can assure you that we will make sure we put it on the agenda. I think what we had talked about and what made me feel okay about this is that, if you remember, we talked about Julianne getting some time to settle into school and the school routine. And Bill Evans asked us to take a little bit off her plate and give her that time. And that's why we threw out October. So I think that revisiting this in October is possible.
Madam Chair.
Yes. Yes, sir.
I will assure the school committee in a recorded meeting that I will not put any police officers within the school's brick and mortar until you have had this conversation and vote, within your school committee. And I'm going to say something I didn't think I was going to say, but I'm going to say it. My old boss would have said, and I love him to death, but he would have said, I'm pulling my police officers back and because we're desperately needed on patrol, desperately needed in the detective bureau. But I believe in this program so emphatically that I'm happy to say that I will absolutely, positively not put a police officer in this school until the school committee decides otherwise, with the caveat that we, the police department, fully support this program for all the right reasons. So I agree with Shannon. I don't want, trust me, we the police don't want this thing swept under the rug because we have to move forward one way or the other. And I completely agree with Shannon. But that being said, I'll happily commit to this school committee, to the superintendent and to the mayor's office that I will not make any moves whatsoever. And I'm sure Allison collaboratively will not either until this school committee decides what's best for the kids. And I'll leave that at that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
I guess my question is to Shannon, what would your proposal be that would fit, that would meet sort of the concerns that you're feeling?
I think that we still need to look into what legally, what that waiver means.
I agree.
Agreed.
So I am not taking back my vote.
Okay. Well, but the vote was to direct Allison to submit the waiver, though.
I thought it was to proceed with.
Yeah.
In order to do that, she has to speak to legal counsel.
No.
If she comes back and says, this is what Russ said, then I'm willing to look at another vote.
Okay, so.
Can I, Madam Chair, could I make a motion that's different than what I proposed earlier?
Sure.
And we'll see if there's a second out there. I would like to make a motion that the school committee be given as definitive an answer as possible as to whether or not submitting the waiver locks us into a decision or if our understanding from the last meeting is correct. I don't know if that's
okay. So here's my uncomfortableness, and I think Lori would probably agree with me. At the time that we voted, I was really having a problem with this and was assured that we did not have to use the waiver. If it turns out that if we do have to use the waiver, if we submit the waiver and we have to use it, I would absolutely have changed my vote, and I would change my vote. So I almost feel like we need to undo what we did and restart, which is what I was kind of pushing for last time, restart at a later date when we have all the information so that we know, number one, that if you file the waiver, you have to use the waiver, or you file the waiver, you don't. We would have a clear answer. Number two, we could revisit the whole issue of what are the positives and negatives of having an SRO and then clearly choose and vote in a more informed way. Lori, what are you thinking about that?
I feel exactly the same way. I never would have voted that night if I had known that we were going to be into a waiver that meant that we weren't going to have SROs. I thought that it meant that we had a chance, as I said before, to research, to find out what's best for our community, to listen to more people, to hear from the officer. And that's what we did tonight. And we've certainly heard a lot from the community. And so I believe, even though I appreciate the 2 attempts that Jonathan has made to try to clarify this tonight, what the motion has to be is saying something like we need to recreate a motion in order to vote on it and not have that other one count. Right. It's not taking back your vote, Shannon. It's just making it clear to everybody, because I don't think it was clear. What 3 of us have said, it wasn't clear.
Mm-hmm. And can I just say, not for nothing, but I have a lot to do. And if the purpose of me filing a waiver is for a maybe, then why am I filing the waiver? Why don't
I
I
agree.
just put it out? Why are you asking me to do work that may or may not be needed? I would rather do it. If you direct me to do it, I will do it. But if you're asking me to do something, and it may or may not be, what you decide, I feel like there's a lot already on my plate right now, and it seems unnecessary for me to do that.
Like a waste of motion.
I mean, respectfully, as I said to you at that meeting, I will do what you direct me to do, but there are pieces of that waiver I said to you would be difficult to complete and would mean that I would need to do research and planning with my team. Not that I'm opposed to doing that. It's just that this is a really busy time and my focus is on starting the school year for remote learning. And so, I guess I'm wondering, why are you asking me to do an exercise if it's not necessary?
And once again, I will say the only reason in that last moment that I said, okay, I will agree and I will vote is because I thought that if we didn't, then somebody would say, okay, you don't have this in place, so we're going to put a state police officer there. And I didn't want that to happen, but that we can go back and listen to that. And that's when I said, all right, I don't want that. But I don't think that I understood. And I said that night, normally I don't vote when I don't understand. We are tired and we want to move on with starting school. And I really appreciate, Dr. LeClaire, that you will do more research on this as well. And we can open this up and it's not going underneath any rug because this is a concern to many people in the community. But that's what I said all along. We have to devote the time and energy to give the right answer to our community and look at all sides. So thank you.
Maren?
So while I think it is understandable that people were confused, and it is a vote that we took. And so I think it's unfortunate now that we're suddenly saying we should take back the vote. We should ignore the vote. We should disavow the vote. I mean, the vote that the fact that the vote wasn't already carried out is concerning from a process perspective. We did take a vote. We did say we were going to move forward with the waiver. That being said, I do agree that part of that conversation, and I don't know if the mayor is still on or not, was that she directly stated that even if we apply for the waiver right now, that wouldn't require us to actually enact the removal of an SRO from our schools. So that was definitely a part of the conversation. And I can understand that if that's not a correct statement, then we should have that statement verified. And that in that situation, then that it does make sense, even from my perspective, that we put a hold on that decision until we get a more thorough final answer on whether or not that statement is true. And so that's what I think the motion should be at this point. Not that we're indefinitely putting this off or sweeping under the rug, is that we need to have facts figured back out and provided to us around, is that waiver require us then to remove the SRO from the school district?
Maren, I just want to clear up something. The reason why we didn't go forward is because you sent an email asking that we go forward with the SRO presentation, and that the equity committee wanted that presentation. So that's why I called Allison and we went back and forth to arrange this.
Yes, correct. I sent you an email based on a conversation, the meeting we had at the equity committee. That had nothing to do with placing the decision of the school committee or the waiver in question. There was nothing in that involved. It was purely saying that we would like to have a presentation by the SRO It wasn't stopping the decision process of the school committee. The equity head, first off, doesn't have any power to do that. Any one member of our committee doesn't have the power to do that. We made a decision as a school committee.
We didn't stop it. We just, all Dr. LeClaire did was slow down till we had tonight. That's it. She didn't not go forward. She didn't not file. She simply did not put her energy into it until we did the requested presentation. So
I just want to reiterate what Maren is saying, though, because I think this is really important procedurally. I think it's really dangerous precedent to be able to take a vote as a committee, delay action on the vote, and then come back and say, we were confused, we take it back. You know, you could imagine other decisions we've made. Oh, I didn't really understand what the hybrid model was. I take it back. Like, that's procedurally a really non-functional road to head down.
I don't agree with that. You can re-vote anything that if situations change and the committee decides to re-vote, you can take back and change a vote anytime. It's just that everybody has to, you make a motion, you second it, you vote, yes, you want to take that back and change that and go on with something else. Procedurally, this is not incorrect. The problem is we just have to decide how we're going forward tonight with this. Lori, you're unmute.
Thanks, Marissa. I understand what you're saying, and that I'll reiterate again. That's why I said continually, I don't feel comfortable voting. I don't feel comfortable. Can we wait? And I should have trusted my instincts and just not voted, because I knew that it wasn't okay, because nobody was on the same page at that moment. We were talking in circles. So I agree with you, and it's something I have never done, and it's something I will never do in the future. So thank you.
Yeah. And I just want to make very clear to the public, because the impression is I did not stop Dr. LeClaire from following through with your vote. I would never do that. However, we did not give her a date that it had to be filed by. We did not tell her do it ASAP. And we did tell her that we were going to be looking at surveys in the equity committee in October. So she had not done it, and then the presentation came up. So I just want to make that clear. There's no way that I told her you were not to file that. I would not do that. That would not be appropriate. She just didn't get to do it yet. And given that we had scheduled this SRO presentation, there was no reason for her to rush it until we heard this. Does that make sense for everybody? Because I don't want anybody to think it does not make sense, Maren. I don't understand.
Procedurally, I think Marissa's example is really important here. So let's go back 2 weeks. We made a vote that we were doing a remote learning program to start.
Mm-hmm.
If that decision was suddenly placed on hold and not followed through by the superintendent, that would have pretty major impact for everybody involved, for our schools and everything, right? So just taking an extreme example, right? We made a decision, we took a vote, we expect that that's going to be enacted from that day, not maybe sometime in the future, right? So
well, then
we made a vote. We did make a decision, and again, so there's a different conversation happening here. There's a procedure conversation that's concerning, right? As a school committee, almost, if you look back at our history, almost every single vote we've made has actually been unanimous, and that's really good. But it also sometimes means we don't necessarily allow there to be dissenting voices that still vote in the negative. So I don't think it actually is the best that we're always voting 107-0, right? So procedurally, that was the action here was concerning. My email to you requesting an SRO presentation had nothing to do with placing the waiver on hold. So
you expected Dr. LeClaire to file the waiver the next day? Because I didn't get the email from you till later, much later, and I didn't know that she hadn't filed it yet. But did we all expect that she was going to file it right away?
I don't think it's a matter of like, did she happen to file it before we have the next meeting? It's like setting up a meeting that is designed to undermine the vote via having a lot more information come out in this meeting. You know, it's like, it's one thing if you vote for a hybrid model and then for forces that we can't control, the virus changes, we meet again and realize we need to change our vote due to outside circumstances. You know what I mean? Versus like constructing, delaying a decision, delaying action, constructing a meeting that is designed to undermine the vote.
It was not constructed that way. The SRO presentation was requested by Marin. He didn't say to obstruct the decision, but he also didn't say to go forward. He just said, please have it. So we brought that forward. Which we usually do when you all request something be put on the next agenda. I call Dr. LeClaire and we put it on the agenda.
So maybe what might be procedurally more comfortable for me would be not like, let's take back our vote, but let's vote on it again, a new vote, and a vote where we're allowed to have dissent within our committee, where we're not expecting to have consensus. This phrase "take back our vote" is just really concerning to me. That's not how voting works. You don't get to take it back.
What I think they meant was to re-vote. You can undo a vote. You can say that you just want to take the same vote over again. I'm not sure what the motion is on the table. Jonathan wants to talk, but you can see how confusing this whole issue has been. Jonathan?
Okay, a couple points. First, to be clear, my motion was not to file the waiver or not. It was to only answer this sort of fundamental question that I think was maybe the piece of information lacking when we made the first vote, which is whether or not the waiver is binding. Because from my perspective, even if this meeting would have been relevant, regardless of whether or not the waiver was submitted, if our previous understanding was correct about the waiver, which was that it was not binding.
Right.
So the motion I was trying to make previously was not, well, the first one was to take back the vote, and we moved on from that. But my last motion was specifically just to get that key piece of information that seems to be missing. So there was another point, but I've lost it right this second.
So it sounds like what you're asking is that we just put it on hold until that information comes through. Is that what you're trying to say, that we just hold?
You guys have already decided to put it on hold, so why don't we just get the information?
Well, we evidently we
It's
didn't,
been 2 weeks.
because we decided to look in October.
Last week, we were under the impression that she was working on it.
That was my impression.
When we left the meeting,
2 weeks
she
ago,
was going to begin working on the waiver, but she did say it would take her time to collect the information.
Right, I understand, and I met with Rick and Mitch the day after our meeting last week when Allison said she was working on it.
Right.
Now, I would think that she would have advised, checked with legal counsel, and we would know the answers by now.
Yes, she hadn't yet.
I did check with legal counsel.
Oh.
And my legal counsel is advising me something different than what the mayor has said.
Oh, so you have conflicting, so the mayor said one thing.
And
then
Cindy asked our legal counsel questions, and they answered her questions.
So where are we with that?
No, well,
And we have that information then. That's what we're discussing right now.
Right, I got I don't know. I mean, it wasn't clear at all.
So I think the bottom line is I don't have a consensus yet from legal opinions.
Right.
I think the mayor consulted the city legal counsel, although I'm not sure in framing that letter. She may have, I don't know who she consulted, and she's not here to answer my question. I consulted my legal counsel, and I did get an advisory from my legal counsel, and he answered follow-up questions And I can share that with you, but it's not in alignment with the mayor's letter.
So can I put forward, it sounds like then there is a strong desire from probably everybody here for us to get definitive answer on this. So what I would put forward a proposal on is that we do place a hold on the superintendent's work on the waiver, and that we get a report back, maybe multiple different views, but as definitive an answer from the mayor and her office and her legal support, and from a school committee, lawyer perspective, and yet we get that definitive information back. And there may be differences of opinions between lawyers. It wouldn't be the first time.
And Mayor, I'm happy to get the chief's legal counsel opinion as well.
That would be very helpful. Thank you, Chief.
Absolutely.
And then
happily.
Yep. And then we can have that information, and then we can revisit this at that time.
I like that.
And at the same time, we can still continue with the equity committee's work on discussing this to provide advice to this committee as well. So they can continue to do that work. And we can also come back at a future time to look at how we might want to survey the public or however other options that we might want to do. But it seems like for right now, we can make it sounds pretty much like we've got an agreement that we could. So I put forward the proposal that we're going to place a hold on this work, and we're going to get several different legal perspectives and recommendations around, does this waiver require us to cancel our SOR relationship between the schools and the police department, or does it just give us options in the future?
Right.
I will second that motion.
Good. Any more discussion?
I like it.
Okay. So Marissa?
Marissa Fleury, aye.
Jonathan?
Jonathan Schmidt, aye.
Maren?
Maren Goldstein, aye.
Lori?
Laurie Garcia, aye.
Shannon?
Shannon Dunham, abstain.
Okay. And I believe the mayor had to leave. Mayor LaChapelle?
She did. She's planning a funeral.
Yes, I know that. And Cynthia Kwasinski, aye. All right. Okay, subcommittee updates. Anybody have one?
So, go ahead, Shannon.
I was just saying the policy committee has a meeting tomorrow.
Okay.
Yep, finance subcommittee.
It's Thursday. Shannon, are we meeting Thursday?
I don't know what day it is.
It's Tuesday. I think it's Thursday. Just making sure.
Yeah, Thursday. Sorry.
Okay, it's okay.
Finance subcommittee is meeting on Monday at 3:30, so that should be up on the website hopefully tomorrow, and Zoom link and all that kind of stuff.
All right. Okay, and no others, right? So now for Allison's superintendent update.
Yes, I know it's getting really late, so I will focus really on the MIAA question tonight under school reopening. The MIAA and DESE put out guidance last week about fall sports. You've heard from several families this evening. I know you've received several emails. Here's the bottom line. If you are in remote learning and you are in a red zone, according to the health metrics across the state, there will be no fall sports. But if you are in a white, yellow, or green zone and you are in remote, then the school committee is charged with deciding whether to entertain having fall sports or not. So that decision is to be yours tonight, and it would need to be in a vote. So the sports that we're considering are, well, not considering, these were the fall sports that we would be able to play: boys and girls soccer, golf, cross country, and girls volleyball. Football is off the table right now. There's the opportunity to possibly play football.
Can you list those again one more time?
Yes. Soccer, girls and boys soccer, girls volleyball, golf, which is co-ed, and cross country, boys and girls cross country. So we have met as the principal, the athletic director, and I met last week when we received this guidance and put forward some thoughts about it and, did some troubleshooting. We met today with our city health agent, Bree, and John Mason from Park and Rec. And so we've had several conversations. I believe the principal is still on, Mr. Evans, and I know our athletic director, I believe he is here as well, and he can take questions. I think Mr. Evans has a letter that he shared with the committee that he'd like to read to you tonight, if you can indulge him.
Thank you, Dr. LeClaire, and good evening, everybody. So I'll just read this straight through. The members of the Easthampton School Committee, this evening, you will be considering whether to allow competitive athletics to take place for the fall season. As you know, the Massachusetts Interscholastic Athletic Association, the MIAA, in conjunction with DESE, have put forth guidance that would allow certain communities to allow certain sports to compete in the coming season based on the health metrics within that community. For Easthampton High School, the sports that would be allowed are, as Dr. LeClaire mentioned, boys soccer and girls soccer, cross country, golf, and girls volleyball. Football and competitive cheer would be in practice only, and the competitive season for those sports would be postponed to the designated floating season, which would be between the winter season and a delayed spring season. The cheer team would be allowed to do sideline cheering at outdoor events in the fall if they chose to do so. After reviewing the guidelines put forth by the MIAA and DESE and pending input from our partners in the Easthampton Education Association, from the City Health Agent and the Board of Health, the school administration would like to recommend that the committee approve participation in the above-mentioned sports for the fall season. Our reasons are as follows. Number one, the MIAA has taken care to ensure that proper precautions will be in place to protect athletes, coaches, referees, and spectators. This includes the wearing of masks when athletes are within 6 feet of each other, modified practices, and in some sports, modified rules or structures. We believe the precautions and modifications put forth in these guidelines are sufficient to keep participants safe. Number two, the Pioneer Valley Interscholastic Athletic Conference, the PVIAC, has assigned committees to work out safety procedures, rules changes, etc. within each fall sport. These measures will further act to protect athletes and coaches. Number three, while the school administration understands the decision to start the year in a fully remote model, we believe that participation in athletics is significantly different to participation in classroom academics with regard to potential safety concerns, primarily the ability to be outside or to be in wide, very large spaces and to spread out. And number four, since March 13th, our students have been denied the ability to interact in the developmentally appropriate ways that are critical to their social and emotional growth. The academic, physical, and social and emotional benefits of high school athletics are well documented. Allowing students to participate in sports in a way that is safe is one way we can begin to restore a sense of normalcy and healthy activity in their disrupted lives. And on a side note, for these same reasons, we would like to find a way at some point in the future to allow our drama and music programs to continue in some way as well. I thank you for your consideration of this matter and for your diligence in guiding our school committee through these extraordinary times. Thank you.
Maren? So I was just going to say, can I just say, to be clear, our recommendation is to have fall sports. And I think that if anyone has any questions, the athletic director is here as well.
Okay, thank you, because I have many. Go ahead, Maren.
So one of my first questions is sort of around safety protocols. So one of the, I'll give a very specific example. In students that were going to be coming in for special education services testing this past week, it's now hopefully going to be happening in the next couple weeks. All of those parents we're going to be reviewing a safety protocol questions that, basically said, were there any signs and symptoms that could potentially be seen as COVID? and parents were going to have to fill that out and provide that to the teachers that were going to be doing that testing. So it would make sense from my perspective, and I don't like to cut down lots of trees and have lots of paper, but it still would make sense to have something like that done before every practice, so that it's not just assumed once and forever you're always going to be safe, but having an ongoing check-in before every practice that recognizes the parent is going to have to think about it, the student has to think about it, and that has to be provided to the coach as they're walking into practice. So that would be, it's sort of a statement, but it's also a question. Has that been thought about, and what is being proposed as not just a one-time thing, but as an ongoing check-in about the safety of all the students that are showing up to their practice?
Yeah, so we're looking at a Google form, Aaron, so that we don't have to do the actual paper, with just a couple of questions that students would need to fill out. I mean, we're actually looking at it throughout the district for anyone that comes into our buildings, whether it's adults or students, would be submitted to whoever is the person in charge of that program, that building, whatever. So we have been thinking about that.
Fleury.
On the same lines as Maren is suggesting, with a questionnaire, I read today that there will be free COVID tests offered in Holyoke, I believe at Holyoke Community College. Senator Vilas posted today. We have done everything we can to keep our community safe. I can understand about the social emotional needs of our students. I understand why they want to play sports. Both children were 3-season varsity athletes. I understand. But I also understand the dangers of putting together in close proximity. We're saying they're going to wear masks. I see young people all the time together playing basketball, not wearing masks. We know that students, especially young people, are asymptomatic and they can spread COVID. I know that tests can be expensive, they can be hard to get, but as I said, I just read today, they're going to be free tests. Maybe we could require to start this type of athletic season in the midst of a pandemic while towns around us are red. We're not safe right now. I don't know if we went down from yellow, that if we can require the athletes to have a simple COVID test. And also, I would feel better if each participant signed something that they would adhere to all of those rules. I would also like them to sign a waiver saying they understand that it is very contagious. They could be asymptomatic, bring it to a family member. Somebody could die from this. It's happening all over the world. I will only vote yes if there is something in writing where each student and parent, because they are not of 18 years of age, they're guardians, acknowledge that. And we are not held responsible at all. They have to take full responsibility, almost like when, you buy your ski ticket and you have that on your pass. So, and I also, the one sport I question more than any other, and if somebody could explain, volleyball. I don't think that our students play beach volleyball. Isn't it indoor volleyball?
Yeah, so if I could respond to a couple things. One is, I agree that when young people are together unsupervised, that it's harder to, they're less likely to wear masks. But in this situation of high school sports, they will always be with an adult that is enforcing that rule. And if they don't abide by that rule, then they won't be able to participate. So, most of these kids are really motivated to play, and, they show up for practice, they work hard. And I think that if it's the difference between playing or not playing, that they'll abide by whatever rules we ask them to abide by. I also think families would I think that they would agree to signing waivers. To your last question about volleyball. The good thing about volleyball is you don't have too many players. It's not as many players as you would football or soccer. And so you don't need to have as many people in the gym. We would restrict or maybe eliminate altogether the ability for spectators to be in the gym during a match. So it would only be the players, the coaches, and the referees and trainers. The good thing about a gym is it's a very wide space. You can open doors and create some ventilation. There are large fans that we have in the gym. And lastly, in volleyball, they would be wearing masks.
So you're telling me they're going to wear masks all while they're playing, because you cannot maintain 6 feet when you're playing volleyball. You run into each other, you back each other up. I used to play volleyball. So they're going to wear masks while playing volleyball?
I think so, yeah. And we would allow mask breaks during practices and during matches for students to be able to go outside and take a mask break. But I think, there are different types of masks. We talked to the health agent today, and there are some masks that really do impede your ability to take air in and out, and others that are a little bit better for athletics. And she was in favor of some of various masks. She said as long as they're wearing something, then she feels like that would be okay. So, that's obviously volleyball is indoors and it's not outdoors. So it's a situation where we need to take greater precautions. Sure.
But soccer is also a sport where when you're all going for the ball, you're in very close proximity. Are those soccer players wearing a mask the whole time they're playing too?
Yes.
Marissa, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could speak to the logistics. We've heard from teachers and from people in the community who are worried about even being in the building, even when they can fully socially distance, because of exposure to other people in the building, including teachers who don't want to teach from their own classroom because they don't want to share bathrooms with a large number of other staff. So I'm wondering if you could talk to the logistics of how will athletes, coaches, even possibly I'm hearing spectators, be using the actual buildings, bathrooms, locker rooms, that kind of thing? And how will that influence the ways that the buildings are being used for educational purposes?
So we would not allow access to locker rooms. Students, and we would let our any visiting teams know that they would not be able to use locker rooms. They'll have to come with their gear, store their gear behind the bench in volleyball. And typically soccer or cross country, I don't think they ever access the building anyway. Soccer is played out on Nonotuck. Cross country, we've never had a home meet. We might have one this year. And golf obviously doesn't happen on our campus either. So really the only issue is volleyball. And so we would tell student athletes prior to not to anticipate accessing the.
They're all going to have to use the bathrooms, though.
Bathrooms, obviously, they're going to need to use. So we would have a custodian on hand to be able to clean the bathrooms and provide wipes in the bathrooms so people coming in can clean whatever surface they're going to come into contact with prior to using it, and then clean it again on their way out. So a certain amount of self-care, as well as custodians on hand. We would also have an additional administrator, game administrator on hand to help make sure that traffic in and out is limited to one person at a time, and that kind of thing. But yes, obviously they'll need to be able to access bathrooms.
So you're gonna have administrators stay after school.
No, so distinction. A game administrator is somebody that is paid by the athletic director.
Oh, okay. So one game administrator?
Brian, you want to jump in?
So normally we have, I'm Brian Miller, the athletic director. We have one site supervisor for any athletic contest. So we would now have 2 site supervisors at every athletic contest. So one would sort of be in charge of the game administration, and the other one would be in charge of spectators and making sure that people are adhering to the guidelines.
So you're talking 2 game administrators. They're going to watch and make sure the kids go correctly to the bathroom one at a time, not using the facilities. Who's going to manage crowd control? Because the governor has a 50-person limit. And so that's my next question is, how are you going to manage crowd control?
So if we were, let's use soccer for an example. As far as, we would be required for contact tracing. So we would set up a station as they pull in where they're going to have to sign in, give their contact information. And by that way, we'll be able to, figure out and limit the number of people that enter. So it's 50 for a soccer game per field. So we have 2 fields. So you could have 50 at each field, and we've gone over precautions, whereas we're going to move the fans to the opposite sides of the JV field and the varsity field. So there would be about 200 yards of distance between the two. As far as volleyball, we've talked about not allowing spectators and maybe using something live stream sort of thing where parents would be able to watch the games that way.
Okay. Also, I'm sorry, just for soccer to say to the participants that they really allowed only one person to be a spectator per athlete. If you have 20 on each team or 20 something on each team, then between the 2 teams, that's really one person per contest. And that if we put that out there to begin with, that will help us ensure that the numbers, we're not going to be standing there saying, I'm sorry, we're at 51, you have to go home, Like we want to be...
But if you have 20 on each team, that's 40. Yeah. And that's not 40 extra people because now you have a crowd size that's bigger than 50.
It's outside of the participants.
It's outside of the what?
Of the athletes. It's spectators.
Okay. So let me ask you a question. I don't want to dominate this, but I have a lot of concerns. We have some towns that are in the red. How is the decision going to be made who you can play against, who you can't play against? Or are you just going to play against anybody who is in your roster of teams to play?
Go ahead, Brian, on that.
So any team that is in the red, their season ends at that point. They're not allowed to compete any longer by the standards. So if even ourselves, if we were to move into red in mid-September, that would end our participation. Looking forward, how are we going to play games? Our goal is to sort of come up with a geographical sort of league. So everything obviously is kind of being thrown out the window here. So what we would try to do in order to limit the amount of transportation and whatnot is find kind of redefine leagues so that maybe we're playing just the teams within a certain geographical distance so that we could limit the amount of travel and whatnot.
Brian, could you just clarify something for me? Could you so you said if a town goes into red, then they're not able to compete anymore. Just for our own understanding and for all the parents listening, if our town was to go into the red, we wouldn't be able to compete. Would we still be able to practice, or would the whole season end for all sports?
It would end. The MIA did open up an opportunity for a waiver where they said if you were in red and then you were back down to green or yellow, you could reapply for a waiver, and they would look at certain special circumstances. For instance, if there was a nursing home in your community that had a high spike, then they could reinstate you. But without that waiver, your season is finished.
So Brian, who's going to check this every day? Because if I have a game on Tuesday and Holyoke is in the yellow on Tuesday, but then on Thursday I have, on Tuesday I play, but Tuesday afternoon Holyoke goes red, from yellow to red. Who's going to be looking at this each time? Who do you have a team of people who are going to be looking at the colors?
The metrics change on Wednesdays, Cindy.
Yeah, so that's my
They change on
problem.
Wednesdays. And so Bree doesn't even know until like every Wednesday. So,
but we can know because there is a daily raw data that happens in because I go up on the COVID
but
site.
Bree doesn't know, we talked to her today. She doesn't know if our color will change this week or not.
Yeah, so here's my concern is that's done every Wednesday. And cases go up and down pretty quickly in different cities. We've seen a number of these city census map happen. They're yellow, they're green, they're red, they're yellow, they're red, they're green, they're white. They're changing. So a week could go by is my point. On Wednesday of last week, a town or a city that the kids are going to play could be yellow or green or white. And then they could be in a much worse shape the day before you play.
Yeah.
And so,
I think that's why we have the 13 pages of guidelines from the EEA. So that, yes, you asked earlier, would they be wearing a mask in soccer? And the answer is yes. They would be required to wear a mask the entire time. So there are a lot of things in place to ensure that the students or the athletes are not contracting COVID. So yes, that scenario obviously could happen, but the idea is that the guidelines that are in place are there to prevent that. So you have the 13-page EA report. You also have the MIA sports committees are going to make rules specific to each sport. And then the PVIAC can also amend those to make it safer. And certainly we can make any adjustments as well.
So could I just follow up on that, Brian? I just wanted to, there's a piece of what Cindy was asking that I think is really important. We would like to know who is tracking that. So yes, it's weekly, so there's concerns, but that's weekly done. It gets seen by Bree. Does Bree then report to you and you know all the schedule for everybody for that next week, and you can know whether or not immediately on that Wednesday, whether we have to cancel any game between Wednesday and the following Tuesday? Or our own season may suddenly get canceled. Please be very clear on how that sort of process of information would get transmitted.
So right now, that process, it would come out on Wednesday. Obviously, Bree would know at that point. If we were in the red, obviously, she would contact me, and then I would go to the PVIAC, notify the PVIAC that we are now no longer able to participate. And that same thing, obviously every school has an athletic director who would be reporting to the PVIAC as well. So as soon as a town is deemed to be red, then that information would go out to all the other schools in the district.
So we wouldn't have to pay attention to necessarily what our competitors were. That would get immediately reported on Wednesday by the director to within their own district, and then that through the PDIC we would be contacted and said that game is canceled because they've now dropped out of the competitive practice, then a competitive game.
Correct.
But there's still a good chance that we're lagging behind because it only comes out on Wednesday. And we're not looking at the daily data. Okay.
One of the concerns that I heard, and definitely one of the voices of the community, parents and students that voiced on this, was that recognizing that they were all volunteering. that this was their choice to be able to practice, their choice to be able to play. I agree with what Lori's comment was that, all of them clearly have to sign a waiver, recognizes the pandemic and the situation that we're in, and that they are volunteering to step forward and still practice in these conditions, with expectations that all these different protocols, the 13 pages, are followed. Can I just get confirmation, obviously, from Brian, that all of your coaches and any kind of additional assistance that they may have on these teams are also stepping forward and entirely volunteering to be a part of this and sort of still coach this season? Are there any concerns from any of your coaches or assistants that might question their ability to teach, to coach this season? Or are you looking for any other different coaches because somebody is choosing not to coach?
So I sent an email out the end of last week asking coaches if they were comfortable coming back and coaching. All of them replied, yes, they were. I explained to them if they were not comfortable, what we would do is I would obviously have to find another coach for that sport, but then, next year they would be allowed to have that position back. So it wasn't, if you're not comfortable, then you're out. It was just, we'll have someone hold that place for you for one season, and then next year you'd be allowed to come back to your position. So each coach has agreed to that.
Yeah, I think, Marin, I'm sort of in alignment with you here that from my perspective as sort of like the role of the school committee as a steward of the district, if we're not requiring faculty to expose themselves to danger that they're not willing to accept, and we're allowing families to opt in, this is a decision that they're making on behalf of their own children. I don't see any reason why we would need to regulate that choice on behalf of these families. I think my two biggest concerns would be, as I already mentioned, just making sure that the usage of buildings doesn't influence the usage for educational purposes. I would not want to increase discomfort among families or teachers who are accessing the buildings for education if there are lots of people on scene. And then my other concern would also be, and you've already mentioned that this is something you're looking toward, but if we are putting district resources toward athletics, I also am really interested in seeing district resources going to healthy ways for other non-athlete students to participate in activities and, opportunities to get together and develop with their peers, music, arts, drama, these sorts of things.
Yeah, I think, the reason that we're stepping is that we have the MIA, we have that association that has really put in all of this. Yeah. I don't know what they have, but certainly that's something that Bill and I have talked about, and making sure that all the students have the opportunity to participate in extracurricular activities. And as far as, the volleyball, I know it's a concern with students coming, or, athletes from other schools coming in. The volleyball games don't start until about 4:00 in the afternoon. So the school has already is cleared out at that point. And then it would be those athletes coming in. We said there would be a custodian there to clean up and make sure that all the guidelines, as well as the two site supervisors, to make sure that everything is followed. The coaches understand that they have a responsibility, because after every practice or game, every ball has to be wiped down, every chair has to be wiped down. So it'll really, be a team effort, obviously.
Well, given we're more concerned about aerosols than surface stuff, what route would volleyball players be taking through the high school? Are they going to be occupying the main atrium? Are they going to be using the restrooms that are attached to the main atrium? How much are they going to be using the space that teachers will be using the next day?
None. So they would come in the main entrance. The gym is immediately on the right-hand side, and the bathrooms are also right there by the cafeteria. So basically they would just be in that front foyer area.
Can you clarify something too, please? So if I believe I read this correctly, the practices have already actually started somewhat. Is that correct? And then the next question is they've not started. Okay. I guess I've certainly seen some teams already practicing around the community. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, they're not high school teams. Those are teams at either AAU, some other youth affiliation program.
Okay. So practice would start, did I see that September 14th officially or something like that? And then when would be the first games that might be starting up after that?
So the official start date would be September 18th for practices set by the MIA. And then I'm not 100% sure, but I believe it's October 1st would be the first play date. And those athletes, you know, the people you see around town playing, like Bill said, there's, you know, softball organizations, youth organizations that are playing, which is part of my concern for these athletes. I know I spoke to one yesterday and she was playing softball and she goes to Connecticut. So I was like, so how is it with the mask? And she's like, oh, we don't have to wear a mask. So, you know, they're still looking, they're still playing, whether it's AAU, club, or whatever it is, but the regulations are not as stringent as the ones that we will have in place.
And if they're playing in a high school sport, they have to be dedicated to that team and not be splitting their time with other teams. So that would actually reduce any of their contact with other teams.
So just to clarify that, you're saying that if they were to play a part of our high school team, then they would not be allowed to play on any other team. They would have them playing in other places. Because there is already stories coming back of kids going to a conference in Connecticut or New York, and well, suddenly we've got a bloom of students who've got COVID. So,
Ryan, can you summarize the bona fide rule?
Yeah, so the bona fide team rule states that if you're a member of the high school team, that team has to be placed above any other competition. So you could not play or come to practice on Monday and then go to Connecticut and play a game that night. So they would be required to be a bona fide member of our school team. It doesn't mean though that they couldn't on Saturday go and play.
Correct.
They could do that for sure.
Lori?
That's what scares me, that they're going to be with other kids. And I mentioned the test, you know, to have them even be able to start, because these kids have been playing with people from all over the place and they could be asymptomatic. And it just takes one player to destroy your whole season. So it's not an unrealistic thing to require tests. But I also want to know, what will the ramifications be if a student is caught like playing soccer with the mask, you know, with the nose showing, and maybe they're told to pick it up and then they're caught again because they're not breathing well? Is that student athlete going to be dismissed from the team for the season?
So right now, like I said, the sport committees are meeting to kind of come up with the specific policies for each sport. So as a coach, I would require my athletes to have their masks on at all time. One thing we'll propose is that we have multiple mask breaks during the event. So we would have, you know, time for the athletes to spread out 6 feet distance, and then take like a 30-second break or something like that. So I can't say right now what the penalty will be if an athlete takes their mask off. That's something that's going to come down from the MIA and then the PVIAC. I certainly can make suggestions to the PVIAC if we have something like that. My thought was, if, you know, it's a penalty, so the play would stop. It would, you know, we would have them put their mask on, separate, and then we could talk about multiple offenses. If there's someone who continually takes their mask down, then maybe there is some sort of, you know, in soccer, a yellow card or something like that, which might prohibit them from continue to play.
But that's not there yet. So
not there yet.
Okay.
And you know, this is coming from the perspective of someone who has taught high schoolers for many, many years, with rules in place, with handbooks in place that they sign. and not every student follows those rules. So as a school committee member in a pandemic that really pushed to have everyone be safe by learning remotely, once again, I support this athletic endeavor for our students, but I want the rules to be followed. And if I decide to drive by one day, the kids are playing with the masks down, I'm going to call you, Brian, okay? Because this worries me. And volleyball really worries me because it's indoors.
Yeah. Just as a fellow high school educator, I thoroughly agree that students having adolescents are prone to rebel against rules and against adults. But one thing that I've found as a student athlete and as a coach is that the leverage of being able to say you can't play is something that a classroom teacher doesn't really have. And as a result, you typically get a much higher level of compliance among student athletes than you would in a typical classroom. So I think that makes a difference. These kids want to play, they want to get back to their lives, and I think that they are willing to make whatever sacrifices they are asked to make in order to make that happen.
So,
Shannon?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had to unmute myself. So I'm curious, I don't know if Bill or Brian would be the best to answer this one, but if we just decide to say, okay, practice and conditioning and not compete, if say like our color is red, if we're not competing, can they still condition and practice?
No. If we're red, no.
Really? So it doesn't matter even if you don't compete?
If you're red, the season is over, period. Everyone goes their own way. You're not allowed to compete if you're in the red.
Now, does MIAA decide that, or is that?
They've already said that.
That's the guy. Yeah, that's part of the guideline.
Okay.
So, unless there's a lot more discussion, and we still have a lot more to do tonight, I guess I think, at least in my mind, I'll say it this way, I still have a lot of questions and concerns about any kind of situation that's going into a school building. I think that we still have overall a lot of conversations that are sort of that are not decided yet. And it's still very much ongoing around our school buildings. So I guess, and with that said, I do know that that volleyball happens at the high school, and that our high school, ventilation system is above any of the current ratings that are being projected. So I guess that piece of it makes me feel a little bit comfortable, but overall, the thought of agreeing at this moment with a lot of conversations still uncompleted around in-building sports seems to be a pretty large concern for me. But I would certainly want to move forward with all outdoor sports and supporting that. I don't know if there would be a way for us to have a motion that might request for indoor sports to get a little bit more additional information. Brian was mentioning that additional rules might be put in place, some additional pieces may be discussed around the buildings. That way we wouldn't put a definitive no on it, but at least that would be still sort of open to more information and more report back. But then at least the outdoor sports, we could proceed and the other piece that I brought up earlier, and I still think would be really, really important, is requiring daily or each day there's a practice that their child and parent is completing a health safety review. So that's something that I would certainly want to see even for outdoor practice. But I just wanted to put forward that idea of splitting this into outdoor versus indoor sports to get a little bit additional information.
I haven't said anything yet. I asked a couple of questions, but I just want to toss this out for people to think if we're approaching a vote. And maybe I am the only person who feels this way. I work with teenagers all the time. I love sports. I played volleyball. My kids played soccer. I know how important sports are. But I also know how impulsive teenagers are. I also know that coaches cannot watch kids while they're watching a game. And a game administrator cannot watch every kid and the crowd while they're watching a game. It's an impossible situation. And I know that there isn't a student who would just say, oh, I don't care, I'm going to mess it up for everybody, so I'm not going to wear a mask, or I'm going to wear it wrong. But kids get excited and they get happy, and they forget. For a small amount of time, they just forget. And we're talking about starting practices at the very beginning when we're just starting school. We don't even have these kids trained yet for all the safety protocols that are important to keep them safe as we come back eventually to hybrid, or even our special populations coming in. We voted for remote learning. And I know how much everybody wants sports, but here's why. I just want everybody to think about this before you vote. We can't even get baseball players who are adults, who are getting paid tons of money to always behave and follow the rules and keep themselves safe. We can't keep everybody. There are a few women's teams that have done a great job of staying safe and been able to play. But we're talking about teenagers who really believe they're invincible, and they just get impulsive. And to promise ourselves that the game administrator is going to catch everything, and the coach is going to be able to coach the players, watch the bench, and watch the teammates is just a Herculean task. It can't be done. So as I don't understand why we are so concerned about beginning school with our teachers and our students and training them and working on safety, but we're going to take teenagers and we're going to put them from all different towns and mix and match them with a 1-week delay of results. That really concerns me. I will tell you what wouldn't concern me. If we had kids who could be tested before they played and we got rapid testing, yes, it's not foolproof because you might be negative one day and a few days later you're positive, but at least we would have a chance of making sure that our children are healthy when they play each other. I am unbelievably concerned that we have very little testing around here. You can only get a test if you're ill. We've shut down a lot of test sites. Yes, if you travel, I know someone who just traveled because they had to. They just traveled to Pittsfield to get a test. That is a long way to travel. If we had our testing for our kids, I would not worry half as much as I am. I love the idea they're going to wear masks when they play. I feel much better about cross country and golf. But I think that you're talking about controlling crowd size, controlling the kids, controlling their excitement, making sure they're always safe. And you're talking about a coach and 2 game administrators, and they're supposed to watch the crowd, the kids, and everything going on. And I just find that impossible. The difference is if you play on an AAU team, and my kids did, the parents drive the kids to the game. Your parents are watching you. They're bringing you to the game. You might carpool with a few team players. But you're not riding a bus. You're not. It's more controlled because you're with your parents. You're with your parents and your coach. I don't know. I just find this very concerning. When we voted to go remote, we're hoping to go hybrid. And now we're just talking about mixing a bunch of teenagers, masked or not masked, to bump into each other and play with each other from all different cities. I find this really unsafe. Really concerning. And everybody else can vote, to go forward with this. You could vote to wait till we see the rest of the protocols. I would feel much better if every kid got tested. But I also know if you ask teenagers, I have students every single day come into school. They don't feel good. They're actually sick, but they want to play that game tonight. And even if you make them promise that they will not show up for practice and they will not play a game sick, they show up sick and they will hide it all day. And if you ask them to go to the nurse because they don't look right, they will tell you they are perfect, but they're actually sick. Because kids love to play sports and they don't realize just how scary it is and how many people they can get sick. Lori?
Shannon had her hand up too.
Oh, okay.
You want to speak first and then I'll speak?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm hearing what everybody's saying and I agree. We have to take precautions, et cetera, et cetera. But my fear is that they're going to do it anyway. At least this will be supervised. Or they're going to go somewhere else and play. And we won't have any control whatsoever about what's happening. So we have to think about those things too.
And I've thought of that as I've seen kids playing all summer. So that's why I'd rather it be controlled. I know they need to play, but I really would like them to be tested. And I think that I think that Brian, you should get on with somebody at MIAA and say, get us some tests, at least start these kids, knowing I know that can change within 3 days. They could be infected. But at least if we know that everyone on our team has been tested, schools are doing it because they have the funding to do it. As a local school is not letting anyone come onto campus without 2 tests. So I think that if this is voluntary, that we have to say you have to be tested at least once. That's where I'm at. At least I know if they're tested. And I gave an option because Senator Vilas posted it. It's Holyoke. Look it up. You can go there. It's free. At least we know they'll be tested. That would make me feel better. And I agree with Marion. I agree with Marissa. I don't feel comfortable with them going into the building at this point for volleyball.
As far as the testing, I mean, I'm more than willing to require that. I don't know that I have the authority to require that. Maybe Allison can speak to that, but I certainly testing at every precaution we can possibly have certainly is to our benefit. So if that is something that you would require, I don't know that I have that sort of authority, but I would certainly be behind that.
I don't have an issue with it as long as we can get the tests, and it sounds like Laurie has a source that we can look up and investigate. I do feel like, and in case anyone missed it, I do want to say that we did meet with Bree, our health agent, who I sent her the guidance last week for her to review. She reviewed the guidance. We met today with her. She asked some questions. We had a nice dialogue with John Mason. Everyone is on board for us to do this safely. And I don't want to characterize the meeting. Brian and Mr. Evans were there as well. But we had Bree's support to move forward with the safety regulations that we were putting in place with the masks. She felt that they were beyond what she's seen in any other regulations for sports up to this point. And they were actually going to be, I believe, having a discussion regarding youth sports in Easthampton tomorrow. And they were going to be taking some of the things that we were going to be doing for our high school athletes and trying to incorporate that for the youth teams. So I think that, if our health agent is saying that she feels that the MIAA guidance is appropriate, then I think that's just an important point that I hope you will consider as you weigh the decision tonight.
I just looked up the information and I respect Bree, but I also know it would be very awkward for Bree to say everyone needs a test if we didn't have any source of a test. So we can all agree, I think every person on this screen would say it would be a good idea just to make sure that somebody who's going to be, you know, heading the ball next to my child doesn't have COVID, because that person can look fine, but then is going to get somebody sick. Grandma that you're seeing on Monday.
I don't have an issue with a test, Laurie, and particularly if it's free, because I wouldn't want to make a hardship.
Can I just say, Senator John Velas yesterday posted, starting Wednesday, tomorrow, there will be free COVID-19 testing offered in Holyoke as part of the state's Stop the Spread initiative. The testing will be done by drive-through at Holyoke Community College, and no appointment is necessary. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, 7 to 11, Tuesday and Thursday, 2 to 7. You do not need to be a resident of Holyoke or have any symptoms of COVID-19 to get tested. And I thank Senator John Velas, who is a wonderful person, a friend of mine, because he is really working hard to see testing get spread across the state.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with that idea, Laurie.
And are we talking about just the one initial test to start the season? Is that?
Brian, it would be great if we said every, week, but I can't do that. I would just feel a little better knowing that they're going to start the season. I know that they can get it the next day, but it's something.
Yeah. My only concern with that, and I'm really glad. I'd love to see them all get tested, but again, my concern with that is that the other team they're playing may not have that same rule, and most likely will not have that same rule. So those kids will not be tested. So your teammates might be negative, but you have no idea the status of
have widespread testing. I think what the MIA here is relying upon is the health protections that they have in place. Like, a one test to start is great for that first week, but then it becomes irrelevant for the length of the season. I think we have to trust that the MIA has put together appropriate safety protocol, and that the parents who are choosing to enroll their children in this program are accepting that risk. That level of risk is something they can tolerate. And I don't feel like it's my role to say that they can't accept that level of risk.
But it's a school-sponsored event, so you are sponsoring this intermingling of kids from other towns and other teams. Okay, it's not the parents. The schools are sponsoring this. It is the Easthampton.
Signing a waiver?
Are they signing waivers?
We certainly can have them sign a waiver, sure.
The other thing I wanted to mention, I know you guys are really concerned about volleyball. One of the things that we have to take into consideration is that's the one sport that is, I realize, inside, but it can be done outside, I would think. The other thing is that there's no player contact, like from the other team. You don't.
No, there's only contact with your own teammates.
And
you're right.
I don't see why we couldn't use the back door of the gym instead of having people coming into the foyer, and then rope off the path to the bathroom. So it'd be very contained. And there's fans in there.
No spectators.
Right. We could, where they come in the back entrance down by the weight room, come in that way, exit.
Even where we go in for voting.
Yep. So if the opposite end by the other end by the weight room and the locker rooms, there's another entrance. They can come in that way and then exit out the one that you come in for voting. So you could potentially limit them. And we talked about locker rooms not being open, but you could possibly have the locker room open. Those would be the bathrooms, because it's only girls volleyball. So you would only have to open the girls locker room, which would allow, one or two girls to go in, use the bathroom. So they would never really have to go into that front area if we, we could work that out where they're just in that back area and then out the front exit, which is to the outside.
Yeah, I think it's really possible to limit the exposure to the rest of the building. I also think that if they're in there from 4 to 6 o'clock or 4 to 6:30, that if it's an aerosol concern, that I don't know that a teacher coming into the building at 7 o'clock the next morning and not being in the gym area or in the locker room area is really being put in any risk. And again, with the ventilation system that we have at the high school, all old air gets pushed out and new filtered air gets pushed in. So I don't think that that creates a significant risk for the other people that may choose to be in the building. Again, they're choosing to be in the building as well, and they can always choose to stay out.
So maybe to help push us along a little bit, since this is probably still only about 2/3 of the way through our meeting, what I would like to put forward then is a proposal. Jonathan, unless you'd like to do that because you're usually the one phrasing it? No? Okay. So I would like to put forward a proposal that the school committee approve fall sports under the guidelines of the MIAA with the additional pieces that have been requested by the school committee. That is requesting that if free testing is available, all athletes will be tested at least once before the season begins, and that there is some sort of ongoing per practice health guideline checklist that the athlete and their parents need to sign. And it needs to be reviewed by the coach before practice begins. So even if it's a Google Doc, they need to be able to have access to that and see that and understand it. And that then also we are requesting resources and effort be put to implement the same for other non-athletic extracurricular activities so that they can be meeting online or whatever could be deemed possible so that we can start so that those can start to be worked through as well.
I second that.
Any more discussion?
I didn't hear the waiver part.
So that the waiver yes, there's 3 things they're doing. They're signing a waiver that they understand they're volunteering to play a sport during a pandemic. They're getting tested as long as there's access to free testing for them at least once before the season begins. And that then on a per practice or game season, they're signing off on a COVID signs and symptom checklist, and the coach is checking that before practice to approve everybody to participate.
Okay.
And that this fits for all the sports that has been listed so far. Clearly, it does not count for football, but for these sports that were listed previously.
Any other, it's been seconded. Any more discussion?
If I may just ask a quick semantics question that I'm hopeful will not derail anything here. But we have talked about if a district has voted to be remote and then becomes red based off of the state health standards map, that they will not be allowed to play. Can I just get some real quick clarification? If a district voted to be hybrid, do they have to adhere to the same sort of guideline there? I just haven't heard that sort of come up.
Any district that goes into the red, their season is over.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
And to reiterate, though, that if they then go out of being red, at that time the district could apply to get back into practices and such and potential competition.
They could apply to the MIA to get a waiver, who would look at the circumstances of why they went into the red.
And does that waiver come from you as the athletic director, or would that come back to the school committee to review at that time?
I would be the one filing the waiver, but obviously I wouldn't feel I have the authority to just make that decision on my own. So obviously I would go through Principal Evans and Dr. LeClaire.
I'm probably going to be the only dissenting vote, but I really want it on the record. I am really concerned. I feel better they're wearing masks. I feel better we're going to have a waiver. I feel better that we're going to have them tested. But we are going to play other towns and other cities which are taking choice kids in and mixing and matching. You know, we're not even just looking at if we're looking at South Hadley takes kids from other towns. If we're looking at Holyoke, they take kids from other towns. I think this, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope you get to say, Cindy, you didn't know anything you were talking about. But I think this is a really bad idea. So I just want to put that out there before we take a roll call vote. And if everybody's ready, if there's no more discussion, then we'll just let everybody vote. We're good?
I just want to say, Cindy, I have your concerns, but I know these kids need to play. And if they're supervised, they're going to be safer.
I would rather see them, to be honest, I would rather see us as a school district design and implement an activity for after school. I would rather take the coach money and put it into positive activities after school that kept our kids safe than mix us and match us with so many other kids from so many other cities and towns. That really concerns me. I think there's a way to get kids active without risking a spread, and I think we're going to end up bringing it right into our schools. Anybody else? I'll shush. All right, so we'll do a roll call vote. Lori.
Laurie Garcia, aye.
Shannon.
Shannon Dunham, aye.
Maren.
Maren Goldstein, aye.
Jonathan.
Jonathan Schmidt, aye.
Marissa.
Marissa Curry, aye.
And Cynthia Kuzinski, no. But the motion passes. All right. Anything else we need to do? We have a little thing.
I'm not done.
Yeah, I'm going. I'm looking.
I have a school building update. I just needed to relay information to this committee. We had a school building committee actually before this meeting tonight because our day is not long enough. And there is discussion at the building committee level that they wanted me to make you aware of at the school committee level. We are thinking about the nanatorium at Whitebrook Middle School, which is the pool area. And there is a request from the construction company to ask us to take that down now or soon. Particularly, they feel that there's merit to exploring the idea while school is not in session. That is an area of the school that is not used by students, and it would give them more room for a staging area, and it would help move the building project along. And I know Cindy, Shannon, and Maren sat in that meeting with me, and they may have more to add, but they may be looking to these, if they make a recommendation to the school committee at the September 8th meeting of the school committee, they may be looking for a vote from you. And of course, they would be providing information to you at that time about if there is any cost savings associated with doing that and how that progresses the timeline for us. But it's something that they brought to our attention, particularly because there are no staff and students in the buildings at this time. So it's something, I don't know, Maren or Cindy, if you want, or Shannon, if you wanted to add anything to that. No.
Maren, did you want to say anything? Shannon? No?
Sure. I mean, I think it's very exciting, the opportunity to take advantage of the lack of students and parents and teachers that are coming down to Whitebrook, that we could expedite this building construction and potentially even move it up by a semester or more in terms of access for our students. So there's some big questions that aren't determined at this time. But I think that this is very exciting, and then we definitely want to recommend that they proceed with a thorough review about cost savings, time savings, and giving them ability to start to look at that. And I certainly think that there is no impact. Well, I can't say that. There is impact even if we agree to the removal of the swimming pool build sort of room, but that's primarily just in terms of storage and stuff that's left in there and wouldn't actually impact the integrity of the building. So I think at bare minimum that we would recommend that we proceed with that piece of it and wait for additional information to hear back about anything larger or bigger impacts that's possible. I think it's very exciting. I think it's taking advantage of a bad case scenario and making it the best possible outcome we could have.
But they're going to
So
come
more
back with
information to follow.
Correct. Did you want to do anything with the fall reopening, or we just?
No, I think in the expedience of time, I'd like to move on.
Okay. I have nothing under school committee action. Shannon?
I'm sorry. I've heard a lot of concerns from people about lack of communication as far as opening schools. Have all the schools sent out emails? Have people been contacted who their teachers are? How this is all going to work? I'm feeling a little, this is the second week in a row that we've kind of bypassed this.
We have weekly updates that go out to all families and staff. And the building principals have been communicating with all families in their buildings and staff. They've been holding staff meetings. They've been holding parent forums. And all of those that they're recorded, they're put on our website. So all that information is out there. I think preschool is still one area that's still a little bit up in the air. And probably kindergarten as well, because we haven't met a lot of those little ones yet. So that's still programs that we're working on. But the principals are there, and parents can definitely reach out to them if they have questions.
And have we kind of established the special ed programs and things like that? Are we still putting that together?
Well, we're not starting the school year on September 4th with any specialized programs in the buildings.
No. I'm sorry. That's not what I meant. I meant if for breakout sessions and things like that, have people been contacted for those?
I believe they have. I can follow up with, Sarah's there.
Sarah?
I'm still here. You're going to hear a dog bark. So the thing with special education is that teachers have not begun working yet. They start tomorrow. And the very nature of special education is that it's individualized. So it's very difficult to make blanket statements about how we're going to do it because each plan is different. So we have 340 students with IEPs, 340 very different plans. However, the guidance from the Department of Education is that we work with, the colleagues work together and we work with families to identify how we will take those IEPs that are intended to be in person in schools and translate them to a remote learning environment. So we've sent out, I think it was maybe last week, Allison, or I sent out a special education message kind of saying that, and that teachers would be working over the next couple of weeks and into that.
It was on our Facebook pages. Yeah.
So I do understand that people want information about special education, but it's a different animal than general education because each plan is different. So we will deliver every service. We are aware of what needs to happen. We have all of the staff in place, which is very exciting. So and I'm actually meeting with all the different levels tomorrow, all the special education staff from each school tomorrow to get us moving. So we're getting here.
All right, thank you.
I would like to follow up on that, not for the special education piece, but it certainly seems like the pre-K parent that spoke earlier has not had that communication, and you said that's still something in process. I think that, we would like to hear that by next week that all those parents have had communication to them. I think that's a reasonable request that absolutely by next week they should have that information. And then the other piece that I would say too, as a parent of a Whitebrook Middle School parent, I have information that we have a forum tomorrow, but I don't believe I've seen teacher information. So I can't speak to that. I have not received that kind of information for my child.
Lori?
And I want to ask again, are we moving forward to at least have meet and greets for these young ones, these pre-Ks through second graders? Will we have tents in the sites of the schools as you proposed, Dr. LeClaire? Because that was to have those initial meetings. They don't have to be classes, they can be held safely, but just to make those connections with the little ones. And another thing parents are asking me is about the partnership groups. And I know you said that each class was going to have one parent, but I know, for example, one parent who has a child in special education, that parent wants to be involved to try to help the community bridge these gaps. So it shouldn't just be somebody in a classroom. We have different groups of people that I thought were going to work together to make this the best possible situation.
The tents thing, we're planning on doing tents for kindergarten screening, but it is still an issue in impact bargaining. So I still working on negotiations with teachers. So I don't have the answer for that yet.
Speaking of tents, my husband and I walked the properties today, and I think we can put more tents than were first envisioned. And I would be willing to walk with people on the property and see if what my husband and I looked at and figured out is feasible, because I think the more tents, the safer, the better. The more confident people will be and the more outdoor learning we could actually have. So I'm just letting you know, Dr. LeClaire, I would love to walk it with someone, be part of a team to do that. I think we can have more tents than we're already planning on. Is there anything else? We have one last thing. We're supposed to keep having meetings until the start of school. School starts for the teachers tomorrow. So we need to decide tonight whether or not we are going to have a meeting next Tuesday or drop down to our 2-a-month meetings because school has started. Are we feeling finished enough to drop down to just 2 a month?
Considering these meetings are still running 3 to 4, 5 hours long, I would rather meet weekly and find a way to have them be a 2-hour meeting as opposed to every 2 weeks and it's a 5-hour meeting. So I would actually say at least let's keep for right now, have one next Tuesday and the following Tuesday, and then we can always decide from there.
I like that. Does anybody else want to? Everybody's kind of, Lori? Shannon, Marissa? All right, well, if we're not going to discuss it, so do we want to vote or do we? I really do want to hear from everybody, so let's just take a vote. Who would like to continue, or just tell me, weigh in, who would like to continue having weekly meetings? Maren would like to have weekly.
I support Maren's perspective. I was sort of planning on keeping it weekly through September as we sort of prepared for our meeting on the 22nd to then look at the transition to the next phase. So I support that.
Marissa?
I do as well. I also agree with Maren. It would be great if these could be a few hours shorter.
I agree. Shannon?
Absolutely.
Okay, Lori?
Yep, it's fine. We just have too many things on the agenda.
There are too many things, but there's so much going on. So, okay, so that's easy. We didn't have to take a vote. We just all basically decided we're going to keep the weekly meetings at least for 2 to 3 weeks. And we can decide anytime. Anybody could just say, hey, I think we did it. Okay, so I want to make an announcement that when we adjourn, we will not be coming back from executive session. We will actually, we're just roll call voting to go into executive session. We will be in executive session and adjourn the meeting from there. So you will not see us again until next week's meeting. Okay, so a roll call vote to go into executive session. Jonathan?
Jonathan Schmidt, aye.
Maren?
Maren Goldstein, aye.
Lori?
Lori Garcia, aye.
Marissa?
Marissa Curry, aye.
Shannon?
Shannon Dunham, aye.
Cindy Kuzensky, aye. Okay, we will have executive session.